Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto is transported to the world of Demon Slayer and gets a harem with Mitsuri and Shinobu? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A whirlpool in the wisteria. The air tasted of ash and ozone. It was the taste of victory, paid for in blood and bone. Naruto Uzumaki stood in the heart of a crater that had once been a valley. The earth churned and scarred by forces that had no place in the mortal realm. The fourth great ninja war was over. Kagaya was sealed, Black Zetsu was an inert smear on a scorched rock, and the world, for the first time in his memory, was quiet. A fragile, exhausted peace settled over the battlefield, carried on the weary shoulders of the thousands of shinobi who had survived. Sasuke was nearby, propped up against a slab of stone, one arm hanging limp, his face a mask of grim acceptance. The finality of it all hadn't sunk in yet. It felt less like an ending and more like the world holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped. There was no sound, no grand explosion. Just a subtle wrongness, a tearing sensation in the fabric of space itself. A few feet from Naruto, the air shimmered, then warped, coiling inward like a dying star. From this pinpoint of impossible geometry, a single white Zetsu emerged. It was not one of the mindless soldiers. This one was different, its plant-like body contorted in a rictus of pure, fanatical devotion. Its eyes, burning with a stolen light, were fixed on Sasuke. "For mother!" It shrieked, its voice like grinding stone. A pale, brittle hand, sharpened to a point, thrust forward, not at Naruto, but at the wounded Uchiha. Time seemed to syrup. Naruto saw the attack, saw Sasuke's sluggish attempt to raise his remaining arm. Saw the exhaustion that would make him a fraction too slow. There was no room for a grand strategy, no time for a flashy technique. There was only instinct, honed by a lifetime of throwing himself in front of others. He moved. With a surge of borrowed six paths power, he crossed the distance in a single, blurring step. His hand shot out, not to block, but to shove. He slammed his palm into Sasuke's shoulder, sending him tumbling away from the Zetsu's desperate, suicidal strike. "Naruto, you idiot!" Sasuke's yell was cut short as the world dissolved. The Zetsu's hand plunged not into flesh, but into the swirling vortex that had opened behind Naruto. The creature's dying act wasn't an attack, but a key, turning a lock in reality that should never have been opened. Naruto felt a hook sink into his soul, a pull that was absolute and irresistible. The ground vanished from beneath his feet. The sounds of the battlefield, Sasuke's shout, Sakura's distant cry, were stretched into thin, metallic screams and then silenced. His vision fractured into a billion shards of light and color. He felt his body being unraveled and respun, his very atoms screaming in protest. It was a pressure beyond physical comprehension, the weight of an entire universe pressing in on him from all sides. Kurama roared within him, a maelstrom of furious, protective chakra that formed a golden shield around his core. The only thing keeping him from being utterly annihilated. The vortex was not just moving him, it was trying to erase him. He fought back with everything he had, clinging to the memory of his friends' faces, the taste of Ichiraku ramen, the feel of a Konoha breeze. He held on to himself, a single, stubborn point of orange in a swirling chaos of non-existence. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. He was falling. The violent pressure vanished, replaced by a gentle descent through cool, night air. He landed on his feet with a soft thud, his knees buckling only slightly from a landing he hadn't prepared for. He stood there for a long moment, chest heaving, his ears ringing with a profound silence. The golden cloak of Kurama's chakra flickered and died, the fox withdrawing deep into his soul to lick its own conceptual wounds. Naruto finally looked up, his senses slowly coming back online. He was in a forest. But it was wrong. The trees were ancient and immense, their dark trunks twisted into shapes he'd never seen, their leaves forming a dense canopy that blotted out most of the sky. What little light there was came from a moon that seemed too bright, too sharp, hanging in the Saint dusted blackness like a polished silver coin. The air was heavy, damp, and smelled of wet earth, decaying leaves, and a sweet, cloying fragrance he couldn't place. Wisteria, maybe. He took a deep, shuddering breath and tried to expand his senses, to feel the familiar thrum of nature energy that was his second sight. He reached out, expecting to feel the life of the trees, the pulse of the animals sleeping in their burrows. The flow of the world's own chakra. Nothing. A cold spike of dread, colder than any blade, pierced through his exhaustion. He tried again, pushing, concentrating, opening the gates of his sage mode. The world remained stubbornly, terrifyingly silent. It was like screaming into a vacuum. The natural energy he had relied on, the very life force of his world that he could speak to and borrow from, wasn't there. He was deaf, blind, and utterly, terrifyingly alone. Panic, a creature he hadn't wrestled with in years, began to coil in his gut. He was no longer in the elemental nations. That was a certainty that settled in his bones with the weight of a tombstone. Kagaya's loyalist hadn't tried to kill him. It had thrown him away. He was stranded, a castaway on the shore of an alien world. He forced the panic down, crushing it with the discipline of 1,000 battles. Panicking was a luxury. First, assess. Second, survive. He still had his own chakra, and Kurama, though rattled, was still with him. He was wounded, exhausted on a spiritual level, but he was alive. He was Naruto Uzumaki. He'd find a way back. He had to. He had a promise to keep. He had to become Hokage. A scream tore through the forest's oppressive silence. It was high and thin, a sound of pure terror that was abruptly choked off. It was followed by a wet, tearing noise and a low, guttural chuckle that made the hairs on Naruto's arms stand on end. It was the sound of a predator, confident and cruel. And it was close. Without a second thought, Naruto burst into motion. His feet, barely making a sound on the damp leaf litter, carried him through the monolithic trees towards the source of the sound. The discipline of the shinobi took over. He was no longer a lost boy. He was a weapon, a protector. Someone was in trouble, and that was a language he understood no matter what world he was in. He burst into a small clearing and the scene before him slammed into his senses with the force of a physical blow. A small, rustic house stood with its door splintered and torn from its hinges. In the moonlight that pooled in the open space, a creature knelt over the bodies of a man and a woman. It was vaguely humanoid, with pale, grayish skin, pointed ears, and razor-sharp claws, but its eyes glowed with a malevolent, crimson light, and its mouth was a blood-smeared nightmare of fangs. It was chewing on a piece of flesh, the crunch of bone sickeningly loud in the quiet night. A small child, a boy no older than 5, was frozen in the doorway, a silent scream locked on his face. The creature looked up, its bloody maw twisting into a grin. "Oh, good," it rasped, its voice a dry rustle of dead leaves. "I was hoping for dessert." It dropped the limb it was holding and fixed its glowing eyes on the petrified child. Naruto didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. He formed a cross-shaped seal with his fingers. Shadow clone jutsu. With a soft pop of displaced air, an exact copy of himself appeared beside him. The demon's eyes widened slightly, its head tilting in confusion at the sudden arrival of two identical figures. That flicker of surprise was all Naruto needed. He moved to the right, his clone to the left. The demon, its predatory instincts now fully aroused, lunged not at them, but at the easier prey, the boy. It was fast, unnaturally so, a blur of gray skin and black claws. But Naruto was faster. He was in front of the child before the demon had crossed half the distance, his arm extended to block the way. "That's enough of that," he said, his voice low and cold as a grave. The demon skidded to a halt, its crimson eyes narrowing. It sniffed the air, a look of genuine confusion on its face. "You're not a slayer," it hissed. "You don't have that disgusting metallic smell. What are you? You smell strange. Like the sun." It licked its lips, a long, forked tongue darting out. "And you feel so strong. So much life. Eating you will be a true delicacy." Naruto ignored the taunt. He glanced back at the boy. "Close your eyes," he said, his voice softening for just a moment. The boy, jarred from his terror by the quiet command, squeezed his eyes shut. In his right hand, chakra began to churn. A violent, swirling vortex of pure energy that hummed with a contained fury. It coalesced into a perfect, crackling blue sphere. The Rasengan. The demon's bravado faltered. It could feel the power radiating from the orb, an energy that was utterly alien to it. It wasn't a breathing style, it wasn't a blade. It was something else, something raw and primal. What is that trick? The demon demanded, taking an involuntary step back. This. Naruto looked down at the spinning sphere in his palm. This is for hurting people who can't fight back. His clone, which had circled around behind the demon, shot forward. The demon spun, lashing out with its claws, and tore the clone apart in a spray of leaves and wood, a substitution. The real clone was already in the air, dropping down with a kick aimed at the demon's head. The demon ducked, but the feint had done its job. It had turned its back on the original. Naruto closed the distance in an instant. He didn't scream a battle cry. He just drove the Rasengan forward, slamming it into the center of the demon's back. The impact was devastating. The raw, untamed power of the chakra sphere ripped into the demon's body, not cutting, but grinding, tearing, and annihilating. The demon let out a high-pitched, unearthly shriek as its spine turned to dust and its organs were pulped. It was thrown forward, tumbling through the air like a discarded doll before slamming into a tree with enough force to splinter the ancient wood. It lay in a crumpled heap, its body mangled and broken. But it wasn't gone. To Naruto's shock, the grievous wounds began to stitch themselves back together. Torn muscle writhed and reconnected, shattered bones snapped back into place. Ha! Ha ha! The demon coughed, pushing itself up. Its torso was still a mess, but it was healing at a visible, horrifying rate. A powerful trick, but not enough. Unless you have one of those special swords and know how to take my head, you can't kill me. I am immortal. Naruto stared, his blue eyes wide with a mix of disgust and disbelief. This regenerative power, it was on par with the first Hokage's, maybe even greater. What kind of creature was this? Immortal, Naruto said, his voice flat. Nothing is immortal. He raised his hand, and this time, the chakra he gathered was far denser, far more potent. Kurama, sensing his host's resolve, poured a measure of his own vast power into the attack. The Rasengan in his hand grew, swelling to the size of a large melon, its hum deepening into an angry roar. Wind-natured chakra, sharp and invisible, whipped around it, forming a miniature shuriken of razor-sharp blades. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. The demon's eyes, for the first time, filled with genuine terror. It knew, on a cellular level, that whatever was coming for it was absolute. It turned to flee, but it was far too late. Naruto didn't throw it. He didn't need to. He used his immense speed to appear directly in front of the creature. A golden flash of movement that the demon's eyes couldn't even track. He thrust the screaming sphere of wind and chakra forward. Disappear. The moment the Rasenshuriken made contact, it NDED into a vortex of microscopic wind blades that shredded the demon at a level beyond regeneration. It wasn't just cutting flesh, it was severing the connections between its cells. The demon's shriek was cut short as its entire being was dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind not even a speck of dust. The clearing fell silent once more, the only sound Naruto's own ragged breathing. The expenditure of such a powerful technique on top of his existing exhaustion hit him like a tidal wave. The world swam in his vision, gray spots dancing at the edges. He stumbled, catching himself on a knee. He had won, but the victory felt hollow. He had arrived too late for the parents, and he had no idea where he was or what he had just fought. He pushed himself to his feet and turned to the boy, who had finally opened his eyes and was staring at the spot where the monster had been with a look of numb shock. Before Naruto could say a word, a new presence entered the clearing. She moved with the fluid grace of a falling leaf, yet with an explosive speed that spoke of immense physical power. One moment the clearing was empty, the next she was there, landing lightly on her feet, her hand resting on the hilt of a strangely thin and flexible sword. She was a whirlwind of color in the drab forest. Her long, pale pink hair, fading to a lime green at the tips, was braided thick and hung over her shoulders. She wore a modified version of what looked like a school uniform, but with a short skirt and a wide opening at the chest that seemed incredibly impractical for combat. Her eyes, a startling shade of light green, were wide with shock, fixed not on the dead bodies or the terrified child, but on him. Mitsuri Kanroji, the love Hashira, had been tracking this demon for 2 days. It was a nasty one. preying on families in isolated homes, and its trail had been maddeningly difficult to follow. She had finally picked up its scent, a thick, coppery stench of blood, and had rushed towards it. Her heart pounding with the familiar mix of fear and righteous duty. She had prepared herself for a fight, for the sight of gore, for the screams of the dying. She had not prepared for this. Shish. Burst into the clearing to find the aftermath. The demon was gone, utterly. Not even a trace of its dissolving body remained, which was impossible unless it had been exposed to direct sunlight. And, in the center of the clearing stood a man who shone like the sun itself. He was tall, with spiky blonde hair and eyes as blue as a summer sky. He was dressed in strange, tattered black and orange clothing, and he radiated an aura of power so immense, so overwhelming, it was a physical force. It made the air hum. It made her muscles tense and her heart, her ridiculously overactive heart, beat a frantic, pounding rhythm against her ribs that had nothing to do with fear. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. She had seen him in the final moments of his attack, a flash of golden light and a sound like 1,000 birds shrieking at once. She didn't know what she had witnessed, but she knew it was a display of power that dwarfed anything she had ever seen, even from her fellow Hashira. Guillaume's strength was like a mountain, immovable and absolute. This boy's power was like the ocean, a boundless, churning, and untamable force of nature. And now, that force was looking right at her. His blue eyes, filled with a weariness so profound it seemed to reach into his soul, met hers. He looked confused, wary, but not hostile. Naruto pushed himself fully upright, his body screaming in protest. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that was threatening to drag him under. This newcomer, she was human, he could tell that much. But she felt different. Her physical energy was astonishingly high, far beyond that of a normal person. She carried a sword, and her posture was that of a trained warrior. An ally, a threat, he was too tired to tell. Who? He started to ask, but the word caught in his throat. The strain of the dimensional travel, the fight, the shock of his displacement, it all came crashing down on him at once. His vision tunneled. The vibrant pink and gray of the woman's hair blurred into a soft watercolor wash. The ground rushed up to meet him. He collapsed. Mitsuri gasped, her training and her instincts screaming at her at the same time. He could be a trick. A new kind of demon. Be careful, her mind warned. But her heart, as always, screamed louder. He saved that child. He's hurt. Help him. She rushed forward, her strange, whip-like blade remaining sheathed. She knelt beside the blonde man, her breath catching in her throat. Up close, his face was younger than she'd thought, etched with lines of stress but possessed of a strange, boyish charm. There were faint, whisker-like marks on his cheeks. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow. She looked from the unconscious stranger to the traumatized boy still frozen in the doorway, then to the savaged bodies of his parents. Her heart ached with a familiar sorrow. She couldn't leave the boy. And she couldn't leave this man, this mystery, this impossibly powerful being who had appeared from nowhere and vanished a demon like it was nothing more than a bad dream. Her orders were to eliminate the demon and report back. But the Hashira were also charged with protecting humanity, and that meant protecting its assets. And this man, whatever he was the greatest asset she had ever laid eyes on. A quick check confirmed he had a pulse, that he was warm, that he was, against all odds, human. Gently, she scooped him up. He was lean, but corded with a wiry strength that was surprising even to her. He murmured something in his sleep, a name that sounded like a sigh. Sakura, holding the powerful stranger in her arms. Mitsuri walked over to the boy and knelt down, her expression softening into one of boundless compassion. It's all right now, she said, her voice a gentle balm. I'm here. We'll take care of you. The boy finally broke, his face crumbling as he launched himself into her embrace, his small body racked with silent sobs. Mitsuri stood, holding the sleeping warrior in one arm and the weeping child in the other. The moon shone down on the small, tragic clearing. She had come here expecting to fight a demon. Instead, she had found a miracle and a tragedy all wrapped in one. With a deep breath to steady her wildly fluttering heart, she made a decision that would change the course of the war against the demons forever. She turned her back on the ravaged home and Gone the long journey back to headquarters. She had a report to make, and she had a feeling that the master would be very, very interested in what, and who, she was bringing home. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Fox in the Butterfly House. Consciousness returned not as a rush, but as a slow, gentle tide. The first thing Naruto registered was the smell. It was clean, sterile, with the sharp tang of antiseptic and the faint, sweet scent of flowers. It was the smell of a hospital, a place he was all too familiar with. He lay still for a long moment, taking inventory. His body ached with a profound, bone-deep weariness, the likes of which he hadn't felt since his first brutal training sessions with Jiraiya. But the sharp pains were gone. He felt treated. He cracked an eyelid open. The room was simple, bathed in the soft light of a paper-screened window. He was in a comfortable futon, a light blanket draped over him. His own tattered orange and black jacket and pants were gone, replaced by a simple, loose-fitting yukata. He pushed himself up, his muscles protesting. His hands went to his torso, feeling the smooth, expertly wrapped bandages beneath the cloth. Whoever had found him was a skilled medic. "Kurama, you there?" he thought, sending the query into the depths of his mind. A low, rumbling growl answered him. "Of course I am here, you reckless fool. Where else would I be? That ridiculo. A stunt tore a hole in more than just space. It felt like it tried to peel my chakra right off your soul." Naruto felt a wave of relief so potent it almost made him dizzy. As long as he had his partner, he wasn't truly alone. "You okay?" "I will be. This world, it feels wrong. Empty. There is no natural energy to speak of. Drawing on it here would be like trying to drink from a dry riverbed." The gray T. Fox's voice was laced with a deep-seated unease. "We are on our own, Kit. Whatever power you use, it comes only from us." Naruto's jaw tightened. It confirmed his worst fear. No sage mode. Limited reserves. Every jutsu he used would have to be carefully measured. He was powerful, yes, but he was no longer a demigod swimming in an ocean of energy. He was a canteen in the middle of a desert. The G-screen door slid open with a whisper-soft sound, revealing a woman who seemed to glide rather than walk into the room. She was petite, with dark purple eyes and a serene smile that didn't quite seem genuine. A butterfly ornament was pinned in her dark, swept-up hair, and she wore a haori patterned with butterfly wings over a standard, dark uniform. She carried a tray with a small teapot and a single cup. "Ah, you are awake," she said, her voice as smooth and pleasant as polished stone. "I am glad. My name is Shinobu Kocho. You are at the Butterfly Mansion, a place for demon slayers to recover. You have been unconscious for 2 days." She knelt gracefully beside his futon, pouring a cup of tea. The smile never left her face, but her eyes were sharp, analytical, dissecting him piece by piece. Naruto had faced down interrogators like Ibiki Morino. He knew a cross-examination when he saw one, no matter how polite the packaging. "Naruto Uzumaki," he offered, accepting the cup. The tea was warm and fragrant. "Thanks for the help. And the clothes. It is our duty to help those in need," Shinobu replied, her smile tightening by a fraction of a millimeter. "Though, we must admit, your case is a rather unusual one. Kanroji-san brought you in. She said you eliminated a demon, without a Nichiren blade." She described a technique of swirling, destructive energy. Her gaze was pointed. "You can imagine our curiosity. Tell me, Uzumaki-san, where are you from? I don't recognize your name from any village." "It's a small place, very far from here," Naruto said, taking a sip of tea. He wasn't going to lie. But he wasn't about to start explaining other dimensions to a woman with a deceptively sharp edge. Vague was safer. "I see," Shinobu said, though her tone suggested she didn't see at all. "And this power of yours, is it a blood demon art? It is unheard of for a human to possess such an ability." The question hung in the air, laced with poison. A blood demon art was the unique, supernatural ability of a demon. She was asking if he was a monster. Before he could formulate a response, the door slid open again, this time with a cheerful, energetic swoosh. "He's awake. Shinobu-chan, you should have told me." It was the woman from the forest, her pink and green braids bouncing as she entered. She was carrying a tray laden with an almost comical amount of food, stacks of rice balls, grilled fish, a bowl of steaming soup, and a plate of sakura mochi. Her bright, expressive face was lit with a genuine, infectious smile that was the polar opposite of Shinobu's placid mask. "Kanroji-san," Shinobu said, her voice maintaining its even keel, though a flicker of something, annoyance, exasperation, passed through her eyes. "Please try to be a little quieter. This is a place of healing." "Oh, right, sorry," the woman whispered loudly, not seeming to notice the contradiction. She knelt on Naruto's other side, placing the tray down with a proud flourish. "I brought you food. I figured you must be starving after sleeping for so long. When I saw how strong you were, I just knew you had to have a big appetite." Naruto stared at the mountain of food, and for the first time in 2 days, a genuine, wide grin spread across his face. His stomach rumbled in enthusiastic agreement. "Wow, thank you so much. It looks amazing. My name is Mitsuri Kanroji," she said, her cheeks turning a shade of pink that matched her hair. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you properly. What you did back there, it was incredible." Swoosh. And then bam. And the demon was just gone. "I've never seen anything like it." Naruto laughed, grabbing a rice ball and taking a huge bite. It was delicious. "It was nothing, really. Nothing." Mitsuri gasped, her eyes wide. "That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Your power. It feels so warm, like sunshine. Not cold and nasty like a demon's." As Naruto devoured the meal with a speed and volume that made Mitsuri giggle with delight and Shinobu raise a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow, the dynamic became clear. Mitsuri's questions were open-hearted and born of pure, unadulterated curiosity. She asked about his hair, the strange marks on his cheeks, what the symbol on the back of his tattered jacket meant. Naruto found himself answering her easily, her bright energy a soothing balm on his frayed nerves. He felt comfortable with her, an immediate and uncomplicated connection. Shinobu, meanwhile, watched their interaction with the quiet intensity of a predator. Every word, every gesture, was filed away. She was particularly interested in how he deflected her more pointed questions about his origins, turning them aside with a folksy charm that seemed to disarm Mitsuri completely. He was a puzzle, and Shinobu Kocho loved nothing more than taking puzzles apart to see how they worked. But as she watched him laugh with Mitsuri, a genuine, unburdened sound, she felt an unfamiliar pang. Beneath his power and his secrets, she saw a profound loneliness in his eyes. A sorrow that resonated with the one she kept so carefully hidden behind her own smile. It was unsettling. The news of the golden anomaly had already sent ripples through the highest echelons of the Demon Slayer Corps. An emergency Hashira meeting had been convened at the Ubuyashiki estate, the heart of the organization. Naruto, dressed in a borrowed uniform that felt stiff and unfamiliar, walked between Mitsuri and Shinobu into a beautiful garden, where the most powerful swordsmen in the organization were already gathered. A sense of profound gravity hung in the air, a stark contrast to the garden's serene beauty. He could feel their eyes on him, a dozen different flavors of scrutiny. A man with wild, white hair and a body covered in scars radiated an aura of pure, unrestrained aggression. His glare was a physical force. "So this is him," Tsunemi Shinazugawa snarled, his voice like gravel. "He reeks of unnatural power. For all we know, he's a new type of demon that can walk in the sun. I say we cut off his head and see if he grows it back." Now, Shinazugawa-san," Shinobu said, her smile firmly in place. "There's no need to be hasty. He has shown no hostility. He appeared out of nowhere and can destroy demons with his bare hands." Tsunemi shot back. "That's hostility enough for me." A towering, muscular man with white, pupil-less eyes stood with his hands clasped in prayer. Tears streaming down his face as he clutched a string of prayer beads. "What a pitiful creature," Guillaume Himahima murmured, his deep voice vibrating with a sorrow that seemed to encompass the entire world. "To be so powerful, yet so lost. We must proceed with compassion and caution." Namu Amida Butsu, a man with mismatched eyes and a snake coiled around his holders glared at Naruto from his perch in a tree branch, his bandaged mouth hiding his expression. "Kanroji seems quite taken with him," Obanai Iguro hissed, his voice dripping with venomous suspicion. Don't let your ridiculous sentimentality cloud your judgment, Mitsuri. Mitsuri flushed, looking down at her feet. He saved a child, Iguro-san. He's a good person, I can feel it. A tall, flamboyantly dressed man with two large swords strapped to his back struck a pose, jewels glittering on his headband. His appearance was completely unflashy, but his demolition of that demon. Spectacular. Tengen Uzui declared. I, for one, am intrigued. A young man with fiery yellow and red hair and eyes that burned with an intense passion smiled broadly. His spirit burns brightly. I can see no evil in him. Perhaps he is a gift from the gods to aid us. Kyojuro Rengoku boomed, his voice full of unwavering optimism. A boy with long, mint-green hair stared up at the sky, his expression vacant. What shape was that cloud again? Muichiro Tokido mumbled to himself, seemingly oblivious to the tense gathering. Gyu Tomioka, meanwhile, stood apart from the others, his face an unreadable mask, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The debate raged, a storm of suspicion, curiosity, and outright hostility. Naruto stood silently through it all, his arms crossed. He had faced down entire armies and world-ending threats. A council of prickly swordsmen was hardly going to intimidate him. He let them talk, gauging their personalities, identifying the hotheads, the thinkers, the ones who might be allies. Finally, a calm, gentle voice cut through the noise. He has arrived. Two young girls with white hair slid open the doors to the main house, revealing a man seated on the veranda. He had black, shoulder-length hair and a calm, beatific smile. The upper half of his face was covered by a curse mark that looked like raw, melted skin, rendering him blind. Yet, his presence commanded an immediate and absolute respect. Every Hashira, even the volatile Sanemi, instantly knelt, their heads bowed in reverence. This was Kagaya Ubuyashiki, the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. My children, Kagaya said, his voice a soothing melody. There is no need for conflict. We are here to seek the truth. Naruto Uzumaki, would you be so kind as to tell us your story? Naruto, feeling the sincerity in the man's voice, gave a slight bow of his head. He gave them the same version he'd given Shinobu, a warrior from a distant land, brought here by a strange power he didn't understand, a stranger in a strange land whose only wish was to find a way home. Sanemi scoffed, rising to his feet. Words are wind, Oyakata-sama. He could be lying. We need proof that he isn't a threat. He pointed his Nichiren blade at Naruto. Let me fight him. I'll carve the truth out of him myself. Kagaya was silent for a moment, his head tilted as if listening to the wind. A demonstration, he said finally. That seems prudent. Not a battle to the death, Shinazugawa. A spar, to gauge his abilities and his intent. Naruto-san, would you consent to this? Naruto's eyes met Sanemi's furious glare. He saw the challenge there, but also a sliver of fear. Fear of the unknown. The fastest way to deal with that was to replace it with respect. Fine by me, Naruto said with a shrug. But I'm not going to hurt him. Sanemi's face contorted in a sneer. You won't get the chance. They moved to the estate's spacious training grounds, the other Hashira forming a wide circle to observe. The air crackled with anticipation. Sanemi drew his jagged green blade, a feral grin spreading across his face. He settled into a low stance, the air around him seeming to sharpen. Let's see what you've got, you freak. He roared, and launched himself forward. Wind breathing, first form, dust whirlwind cutter. He moved like a typhoon, a horizontal cyclone of slashes designed to shred his opponent from all sides. The attack was blindingly fast. A storm of lethal green steel. Naruto didn't draw a weapon. He didn't form a jutsu. He just moved. With a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size, he flowed around the attack. He ducked under a slash that would have decapitated him, leaned back to let another whistle past his nose, and sidestepped a third with an almost casual air. He wasn't just dodging. He was moving with a preternatural understanding of Sanemi's movements, his body always exactly where the sword wasn't. To the assembled Hashira, it looked less like a fight and more like a leaf being tossed about in a storm. Completely unharmed and untouched by the gale's fury, Sanemi grew more and more enraged by his opponent's effortless evasion. He transitioned seamlessly into another form. Fourth form. Rising dust storm. He unleashed a series of slashes from below, designed to look like trees being blown upward by a gale. Naruto didn't even seem to be trying. He used the flat of his palm to gently redirect the flat of Sanemi's blade, using the wind Hashira's own momentum to spin him slightly off balance. He never once went on the offensive. His movements were economical, precise, and utterly dominant. He was showing them, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was on a completely different level. Mitsuri watched with her hands clasped to her chest, her heart hammering away. He was like a dancer. So powerful, so confident, yet so gentle. He wasn't trying to win, he was trying to teach. Obanai watched from his tree, his visible eye narrowed to a slit, his knuckles white where he gripped the branch. This was not the brute he had expected. This was a master. Stand still and fight me. Sanemi screamed, his frustration boiling over. He lunged forward in a simple, desperate thrust, abandoning his breathing forms for a direct attack. This was the moment Naruto had been waiting for. As the tip of Sanemi's sword lunged for his heart, Naruto moved. He didn't dodge. He flowed forward, inside the sword's reach. In a single, fluid motion that was too fast for most of the Hashira to even follow, his left hand came up and gently cupped the back of Sanemi's sword hand. His right hand, fingers extended, lightly tapped Sanemi's wrist. There was no sound, no great display of force, but the effect was absolute. Sanemi's sword flew from his grasp, spinning end over end through the air before embedding itself deep into the dirt 20 feet away. Sanemi froze, his lunge carrying him forward until he was chest to chest with Naruto, his sword hand still extended, now empty and tingling from the precise nerve strike. He stared at his empty hand, then at the blond man's calm blue eyes. The entire training ground was shrouded in a stunned, deafening silence. The Wind Hashira, one of the most ferocious and skilled swordsmen in the entire Demon Slayer Corps, had been utterly and completely neutralized. He had been disarmed without even being touched by a weapon, in a display of such casual, overwhelming superiority that it bordered on insulting. Naruto took a step back, giving Sanemi space. "See," he said, a small, sad smile on his face. "No need to fight." Kagaya Ubuyashiki's gentle voice cut through the thick silence, filled with a quiet, unshakable authority. "The demonstration is over." He turned his blind gaze towards Naruto. "It is clear you are not our enemy. Forgive my son's zealousness. You are a guest of the Demon Slayer Corps. You will remain here, at the Butterfly Mansion. Shinobu, Mitsuri, I am placing him under your joint observation. Please help him acclimate to our world, and perhaps, in turn, he can help us with ours." No one argued. Sanemi stood trembling, not with rage anymore, but with a complex mix of humiliation and pure, undiluted awe. The other Hashira looked at Naruto with new eyes. He was no longer just an anomaly. He was a force of nature, a calm in the center of the storm, and a mystery they were all now desperate to understand. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Whispers of Poison and Promises. The Butterfly Mansion was a haven of structured chaos, and Naruto found himself falling into its rhythm with surprising ease. He was an outsider, a creep, of impossible power and unknown origin, yet the residents, from the young girls Sumi, Hyo, and Naho to the stern but capable Aoi Kanzaki, quickly grew accustomed to his presence. His chakra was a foreign concept. His jutsu were mystifying, but his willingness to hang laundry, his bottomless appetite, and the easy, genuine smile he offered everyone were a universal language. He watched the young demon slayers go through their brutal rehabilitation training, their bodies pushed to the breaking point to reclaim the strength the demons had stolen from them. It reminded him of his own academy days, only stripped of all innocence. These children were being forged into weapons, their youth sacrificed on the altar of a war he was only just beginning to understand. He found himself offering quiet encouragement, sharing a rice ball, or simply being a solid, reassuring presence. They, in turn, began to see him not as the monster who had casually humbled the Wind Hashira, but as the kind, ghtly goofy man with the whisker marks who ate more than 3 people combined. His days were divided between these simple moments and his observation by Mitsuri and Shinobu. The term was a formality. It had quickly become a routine of shared meals, walks through the gardens, and a slow, cautious exchange of histories. He told them carefully edited tales of his world, framing the tailed beasts ancient spirits of nature and the ninja villages as fiercely independent clans of warriors. He spoke of teamwork, of bonds forged in battle, of a dream to lead his people into an era of peace. In return, they painted a grim picture of their own reality, of man-eating demons that haunted the night, of a centuries-long struggle fought in the shadows, and of the man responsible for it all, the demon progenitor, Muzan Kibutsuji. The name was always spoken in a hushed, venomous tone. Muzan was not just an enemy, he was a disease, a blight on the world. As Naruto learned more, a familiar, righteous anger began to smolder within him. It was Akatsuki, Orochimaru, Kage all over again, a powerful being who saw ordinary people as nothing more than cattle to be consumed for their own selfish desires. He didn't know how he had gotten to this world, but as long as he was here, he couldn't stand by and do nothing. One afternoon, seeking a quiet place to meditate and try, for the 100th time, to feel for a flicker of natural energy, he followed the sound of rhythmic, whistling air. In a secluded training yard, framed by vibrant azalea bushes, he found Mitsuri. She was a whirlwind of pink and green, her unique, whip-like Nichiren blade moving with a grace that was as beautiful as it was deadly. The sword, impossibly thin and flexible, flowed around her like a ribbon in the wind, then snapped taut with incredible force, slicing through the air with a sound like tearing silk. Love breathing, first form, shivers of first love, she whispered, and a series of extended, arcing slashes coiled through the air, carving deep gouges into a row of bamboo practice targets. She moved with a dancer's grace and an acrobat's flexibility, her body contorting in ways that seemed to defy skeletal structure. Naruto watched from the edge of the yard, completely captivated. He had seen countless fighting styles, from the elegant brutality of the Hyuga's gentle fist to the wild, unpredictable movements of Killer Bee. But this was something else entirely. It was unconventional, deeply personal, and utterly mesmerizing. Most warriors sought rigidity and power, she embraced fluidity and speed. Mitsuri finished a complex series of movements, her chest heaving, a light sheen of sweat on her brow. She finally noticed him leaning against a tree, his blue eyes watching her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. A deep blush instantly flooded her cheeks. "And Naruto-san," she stammered, trying to coil her blade in a less conspicuous way. "How long have you been watching? I must look so strange." It was an old insecurity, a fear that had haunted her for years. Her abnormal strength, her bizarre fighting style, her massive appetite, the very things that made her a Hashira were the same things that had made her an outcast. An oddity to be whispered about. Naruto pushed off the tree and walked toward her, a genuine, admiring grin on his face. "Strange, Mitsuri-san, that was amazing." Her eyes widened. Your sword," he said, gesturing to the weapon. "It moves like it's alive. The way you combine your flexibility with its reach, it's unpredictable. Most swordsmen have a limited range, a zone you can predict. But your attack zone is everywhere, all at once. It's an incredible fighting style." He wasn't just offering a hollow compliment. He was analyzing it, seeing it or the brilliant and lethal art form it was. He saw the strategy behind the spectacle. Mitsuri's heart did a little flip-flop in her chest. You really think so?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Most people think it's just weird." "The best fighters are always a little weird," Naruto said with a shrug. "It's what keeps their enemies guessing. It reminds me of a technique from my village, using chains of pure energy. But this is better. It requires more skill, more control." He looked her right in the eyes, his own gaze unwavering. "Your strength isn't something to be embarrassed about. It's a gift. Anyone who can't see that is an idiot." The word struck her with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just accepting her, he was celebrating the very essence of who she was. Part of her she had tried so hard to hide for so long, he saw as her greatest asset. In that moment, her simple fascination with the powerful stranger blossomed into something deeper, warmer, and far more potent. It was a feeling as overwhelming and exhilarating as the rush of a perfect breathing form. His connection with Shinobu was forged in a different kind of crucible. Where Mitsuri was open sunlight, Shinobu was dappled shade, her true self hidden behind a lattice of polite smiles and clinical observations. Naruto, drawn by his insatiable curiosity, found his way to her laboratory in the quietest wing of the mansion. The room was a stark contrast to the rest of the building, smelling not of flowers but of chemicals and crushed herbs. Glass beakers and distillation tubes lined the shelves, filled with liquids of various ominous colors. Shinobu stood over a workbench, her butterfly haori exchanged for a practical apron, grinding something in a mortar and pestle. She looked up as he entered, her smile clicking into place. "Ah, Uzumaki-san, have you come to be my test subject for a new paralytic agent? Don't worry, the effects are only mostly permanent." "Sounds fun," Naruto shot back without missing a beat. "But I'll pass for now. What is all this stuff?" "Poisons," she said simply, her hands never ceasing their methodical grinding. "As you may have noticed, I lack the physical strength of my fellow Hashira to decapitate a demon. So, I have found other, more creative ways to contribute. I am a doctor, and I am a poisoner. I create toxins from wisteria flowers, tailored to be lethal to demons." Naruto walked closer, peering at the array of vials. He saw the lethal precision in her setup, the deadly intellect behind it all. It was a weaponized form of medical science. "So you're attacking them from the inside out," he mused, his mind making connections. "We had ninja in my world who used poisons. Mostly fast-acting neurotoxins delivered by Senbon needles. But this is on another level. Are you targeting their regenerative abilities?" Shinobu's hands stilled. She turned to look at him, her smile for once completely gone, replaced by a look of sharp, undisguised surprise. No one had ever asked such a specific, technically astute question. The other Hashira saw her poisons as a means to an end, a strange but effective tool. They didn't care about the how. "That is precisely the goal," she said slowly, her purple eyes studying him with renewed intensity. "Their regenerative process is a high-speed cellular mutation. I'm attempting to create a compound that doesn't just poison, but introduces a degenerative agent that their cells replicate, causing them to break down faster than they can rebuild. A cellular corrosion," Naruto finished, nodding in understanding. "You're not just killing them, you're making them kill themselves." "That's brilliant." The compliment, coming from him, felt different. It wasn't praise for her strength, but for her mind, the part of her she valued most. She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, an unfamiliar and not entirely welcome sensation. She quickly rebuilt her wall. "It is merely a practical solution to a physical deficiency," she said. Turning back to her work, Naruto was quiet for a moment, watching the rigid line of her back. "You smile a lot," he said, his voice soft but clear in the quiet room. "But it doesn't always reach your eyes. It reminds me of someone I used to know." He smiled the most when he was lying, especially to himself. Shinobu froze, her knuckles white where she gripped the pestle. She felt exposed, as if he had peeled back her skin and looked directly at the rage and grief she kept so carefully caged within her heart. It was the rage that had fueled her since the day a demon had killed her older sister. The rage she masked with a placid, smiling facade. No one had ever dared to call her on it. No one had ever looked closely enough to see. "You are a very strange man, Uzumaki-san," she said. Her voice dangerously quiet. "I get that a lot," he replied gently. He didn't press the issue. He didn't need to. He had shown her that he saw her, the real her, and in that moment, a tiny crack formed in the armor around her heart. It was terrifying, and it was the most intriguing thing that had happened to her in years. This fragile new ecosystem was disturbed a week later by the arrival of an emissary from the capital. He was a man named Minister Tanaka, dressed in a sharp, Western-style suit that looked out of place against the traditional architecture of the Ubuyashiki estate. He carried a leather briefcase and an air of smug superiority. Naruto and Shinobu were on their way to deliver a report to Kaguya when they saw the minister speaking with their leader on the veranda. They paused, hidden by the corner of the building, an unspoken agreement to eavesdrop passing between them. "And while the government appreciates the historical efforts of your organization, Oyakata-sama," Tanaka was saying, his voice dripping with condescension, "we are moving into a new era. An era of centralized authority, of police forces, of rational, modern solutions. These tales of demons are little more than rural superstition, and the widespread property damage caused by your members' unsanctioned battles is becoming a political liability. My children risk Their lives to protect the people of this nation, Kagaya replied, his voice still gentle, yet carrying an unshakable weight. A threat does not vanish simply because you choose not to believe in it. Perhaps, Tanaka said with a dismissive wave of his hand. But the people need to trust their government, not some shadowy band of sword-wielding vigilantes. The Prime Minister is growing impatient. Rein in your people, keep your activities confined to the deep mountains, away from the public eye. The continued existence of the Demon Slayer Corps is under review. Tanaka bowed curtly and left, his polished leather shoes clicking smartly on the stone path. Naruto felt a surge of anger. He had seen this kind of arrogance before, in nobles and council members who thought their political games were more important than the lives of the people they were supposed to protect. Shinobu's hand rested on the hilt of her blade, her knuckles white. Men like him, she whispered, her voice laced with a cold fury that made Naruto's skin crawl, are often the first to scream for our help when a demon is standing over their bed. Before either of them could process the encounter further, a frantic cawing filled the air. A Kasugai crow, the demon slayer's feathered messengers, swooped down, landing on Kagaya's shoulder. Caw, caw, it shrieked. Mission: fortified town of Akebono to the west. Several skilled martial artists found dead. Bodies drained of blood, techniques stolen. Demon sighted near the new clock tower. Caw, Kagaya listened, his expression serene as always, but a deep gravity settled over him. Akebono, he murmured, a symbol of our nation's progress. It seems the demons are adapting as well. He turned his head, his blind eyes seeming to look directly at where Naruto and Shinobu were standing. Shinobu, it seems a new threat has emerged. One that values skill and technique. It requires both a sharp mind and a powerful arm. He raised his voice slightly. Mitsuri, my child, would you join us? Mitsuri appeared from the garden, having evidently been drawn by the commotion. She bowed deeply. Oyakata-sama, I am assigning the three of you to this mission, Kagaya declared. His voice leaving no room for argument. Naruto-san, this will be your first official sortie as a consultant to the Corps. We need your power. Shinobu, your intellect will be crucial in determining this demon's methods. And Mitsuri, your blade will be needed to counter a foe that can defeat other masters of combat. He paused, a gentle smile gracing his lips. You three have formed a unique bond. Let us see how that bond fares in the crucible of battle. Go to Akebono, uncover this demon's purpose, and end its hunt. The three of them stood together before their master, a strange and potent trio. The insect Hashira, a genius of poison and fury hidden behind a smile. The love Hashira, a whirlwind of emotion and devastating power. And the sage, a lost hero with the power of a god and the heart of a protector. Their first hunt as a team was about to begin. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Demon of 1,000 Blades. The journey to Akebono was a study in contrasts. The town was nestled in a valley where the old Japan was reluctantly giving way to the new. Traditional wooden houses with tiled roofs huddled in the shadow of imposing brick buildings, and the gentle clatter of ghetto cobblestone was increasingly punctuated by the rumble of a distant steam train. A newly constructed clock tower, a proud symbol of Western modernity, stood in the center of town, its brass face gleaming in the afternoon sun. It was a town caught between centuries, and fear was a thick, palpable smog that clung to its streets. The local demon slayer garrison, a small, terrified contingent operating out of a cramped office, confirmed the Crow's report. 5 victims in the last 2 weeks. All were masters of local dojos, jujutsu practitioners, kendo masters, even a bojutsu expert. They weren't just killed, they were found completely desiccated, their bodies withered like dried fruit, with single, precise wounds that suggested a death that was both swift and terrifyingly intimate. The townspeople spoke in hushed whispers of a dojo arashi, a dojo storm, a shadowy figure who challenged martial artists to duels and left only corpses behind. Their headquarters for the investigation was a small, respectable inn near the town's center. As the sun began to set, casting long, ominous shadows from the clock tower, the trio gathered in their room to form a plan. He's a collector, Shinobu stated, her finger tracing a map of the town, marking the locations of the attacks. He isn't killing randomly for food. He's targeting skill. He's either consuming their knowledge or testing himself, honing his own abilities. He sounds awfully confident, Mitsuri said, her brow furrowed with a mixture of concern and excitement. Challenging martial arts masters in their own dojos, it's so bold. And scary. It's arrogant, Naruto corrected, his eyes fixed on the map. He's not hiding. He's putting himself on display. That means he wants to be found. He's hunting for something specific. His gaze drifted to the window. Towards the clock tower. The last victim was found near there. That's the center of town, the most modern part. He's escalating. Their dynamic as a team slotted into place with a natural, unforced ease. Shinobu was the strategist, her sharp mind piecing together the puzzle from scraps of information. Mitsuri was the heart, her empathic nature allowing her to connect with the fear of the townsfolk. Gathering whispers and rumors the officials might have missed. And Naruto was the anchor, his calm confidence and battlefield intuition guiding their focus, cutting through the noise to find the core of the problem. He's looking for a real challenge, Naruto concluded. He's working his way up the ladder. So, we give him one. The plan was simple, direct, and dangerous. They would present themselves as what the demon was hunting, skilled warriors. They would separate, moving through the town's most prominent martial arts centers, acting as bait. Naruto, with his overwhelming and utterly alien energy signature, would be the main lure. Mitsuri and Shinobu would position themselves at the two most famous dojos in town, ready to intercept the demon or converge on Naruto's position. As night fell, a tense silence descended upon Akebono. The streets, usually bustling, were eerily empty. Paper lanterns cast a flickering, uncertain light on the path as Naruto walked toward the largest dojo in town. A place renowned for its kenjutsu. He didn't try to mask his presence. Instead, he let a small, controlled amount of his and Kurama's chakra flare, a beacon in the oppressive darkness. It was the equivalent of lighting a bonfire in a field of dry grass, a direct and open challenge. He could feel the demon's presence almost immediately. It was a cold, sharp feeling, like a shard of ice pressed against the back of his neck. It was different from the mindless hunger of the creature he'd fought in the forest. This was intelligent, analytical, and ancient. It was watching him. The dojo was dark and silent. Naruto slid open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of polished wood, sweat, and old blood. In the center of the vast, moonlit room, a man sat in seiza. His back to the door. He wore the formal black hakama of a swordsman, and a katana rested on the floor beside him. He didn't turn around. "I have been waiting for you," the man said. His voice was cultivated, smooth, with an undercurrent of metallic coldness. It was a voice used to command, and to kill. "I have never sensed a life force like yours. It is like a private sun, blazing in a world of candles. Tell me your name, Golden One." "Naruto Uzumaki," Naruto said, his body thrumming with a low-level energy, ready for anything. "And you are?" The man stood, turning slowly to face him. He was tall and impeccably composed, his handsome face marred only by the faint, crimson tint of his eyes. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a nobleman, a master swordsman from a bygone era. But the power radiating from him was undeniably demonic, twisted and sharp. "I am Kageyama," he said with a slight, arrogant bow. "Once a demon slayer, a breath user some small renown during the Sengoku period. Now, I am something more." Naruto's eyes widened. A demon slayer who had become a demon. The ultimate betrayal. Why? Kageyama picked up his sword, the movement fluid and economical. "Why does any man seek to overcome his limitations? I saw the futility of our struggle. For every demon we killed, 2 more would rise. For every generation of slayers, a new generation of demons. It is a war of attrition that humanity cannot win. We age, we weaken, we die. They do not. I simply chose the winning side. And in doing so, I have transcended the pathetic limits of breath and flesh." As he spoke, the air around him began to distort. A dark, crimson aura, thick like blood, coiled around his blade. It was a horrifying mockery of a total concentration breathing aura. Blood demon art. Breathing inversion. Before Naruto could react, Kageyama vanished. He didn't move fast. He simply ceased to be in one place and appeared in another, directly in front of Naruto. His blade swinging in a silent, perfect arc for Naruto's neck. Naruto's danger senses screamed. He threw himself backward, the edge of the blade whispering past his throat, slicing a single shallow line that healed almost instantly. But the shock wasn't the speed. It was the technique. Kageyama had fused a demon's teleportation ability with the Iijutsu quick draw of a master swordsman. "You have excellent reflexes," Kageyama observed, his tone that of a connoisseur admiring a piece of art. "But you are undisciplined. Your power is a raging sea. Mine is a perfectly honed spear." He attacked again, a relentless flurry of slashes and thrusts, each one preceded by a short, spatial jump that made his movements impossible to predict. Naruto was forced onto the defensive, using his superior speed and agility to evade the storm of steel. He couldn't land a hit. Every time he prepared to counter, Kageyama would simply warp a few feet to the side, his attack coming from a new, unexpected angle. This wasn't just a fight. It was a dissection. Kageyama was analyzing him, learning his rhythms, testing his defenses. Meanwhile, across town, the other two parts of the trap had been sprung. Shinobu had taken her position at a jujutsu dojo when she felt it. A sudden, sharp spike in demonic energy, followed immediately by the overwhelming flare of Naruto's chakra. She was about to move toward his position when a second demonic presence flared to life, this one much closer. It was a diversion. A lesser demon, its body a grotesque amalgamation of multiple limbs, crashed through the wall, its eyes locked on her. It was strong, but mindless. Kageyama had left a guard dog. My, Shinobu said, her hand resting on her blade, her smile never wavering. How rude to interrupt a lady's evening. She flowed forward, a butterfly dancing on the wind. Insect breathing, dance of the butterfly, frolic. She weaved past the demon's clumsy attacks, her blade delivering a series of tiny, almost invisible stings. The demon roared, flailing, but it was already too late. The poison was in its system. It would be dead in minutes. But those were minutes she wasn't helping Naruto. Mitsuri faced a similar situation at her location. A pair of swift, agile demons, their claws sharpened like daggers, ambushed her from the rooftops. They were faster than the brute Shinobu faced, clearly designed to keep her occupied. "Oh, this is not good at all," she squeaked, but her fear was immediately replaced by a surge of adrenaline. Her whip-like sword unfurled, a ribbon of deadly pink steel in the moonlight. Love breathing, fifth form. Swaying love, willed claw. She flipped through the air, her body coiling and uncoiling, her blade lashing out in a whirlwind of attacks that kept both demons at bay. They were strong, but she was a Hashira. They were a distraction, not a true threat. But they were a successful distraction. Back at the main dojo, Naruto realized he was being played. Kageyama wasn't trying to kill him. Not yet. He was stalling, isolating him from his allies. "They can't help you," Kageyama said, as if reading his thoughts. He parried a punch from Naruto with the flat of his blade. The impact sending a shower of sparks into the air. "I needed to see what you were capable of, alone. To see if you are worthy." "Worthy of what?" Naruto growled, skidding to a halt. "Of being my final stepping stone," Kageyama replied, his crimson eyes glowing with a fanatical light. "I have consumed the techniques of every master in this town. But their skills, their breath, it is all so limited. But you are something new. By consuming your power, I will create a new form, a style that will surpass Muzan himself. I will become the true Demon King." The arrogance of the statement was breathtaking. Naruto had had enough. "You talk too much," he said, and formed a cross seal. A dozen shadow clones popped into existence, filling the dojo. They all charged at once. Kageyama merely smiled. He spun his sword in a wide, circular arc. Inverted breath, third form, world of slaughter. He didn't teleport. Instead, the space around him seemed to fold and ripple. Clones that chaw, RGED from the front found their attacks landing on his back. Clones that attacked from above were suddenly below him. He had turned the space around him into a chaotic, multi-dimensional killing field. In seconds, all the clones were dispelled in puffs of smoke. But as always, the clones were just a feint. The real Naruto, having used their charge as cover, had gathered a Rasengan in his palm. He appeared directly behind Kageyama, driving the swirling sphere of chakra forward. Kageyama didn't even turn. At the last possible second, he warped, not away, but directly into Naruto's attack. His sword, now glowing with a sickly purple energy, met the Rasengan head-on. There was a deafening screech of conflicting energies. The Rasengan's pure, rotational power was designed to grind through any defense. But Kageyama's demonic art wasn't blocking it, it was absorbing it, turning its power back on itself. The Rasengan destabilized, exploding outward in a shockwave that threw both of them back. Naruto flew across the room, crashing through the paper walls and into the dojo's outer garden. Kageyama was thrown back as well, a deep, smoking gash on his shoulder where the attack had partially connected. The wound sizzled and began to heal instantly. Naruto pushed himself out of the rubble, his eyes wide. This demon, he was on another level. His skill was Hashira level, but his blood demon art made him a strategic nightmare. At that moment, Mitsuri and Shinobu arrived, their own battles finished. They burst into the garden, their eyes taking in the scene, the destroyed dojo, the wounded but regenerating Kageyama, and Naruto. Looking more serious than they had ever seen him. "Naruto-san," Mitsuri cried, her blade unfurling. "So the cavalry has arrived," Kageyama sneered, his gaze sweeping over the two women. He looked at Shinobu, the poisoner, an insect trying to fell a dragon. "Your toxins are useless against a being who can control his own cellular structure." He then turned to Mitsuri, a lecherous smile gracing his lips. "And the love Hashira, such passion, such wasted potential, desperate for a normal life, a husband to protect you. But your strength makes you a freak, doesn't it? No normal man could ever handle a woman like you." The taunts were targeted, cruel, and designed to unbalance them. Mitsuri flinched as if struck, the words hitting the very core of her deepest insecurities. Shinobu's serene smile became a thin, brittle line of pure rage. Naruto saw it. He saw the flicker of pain in Mitsuri's eyes and the surge of killing intent from Shinobu. And something inside him snapped. "Hey!" His voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a razor. Kageyama turned his attention back to him. Naruto slowly stood up, brushing the dust from his borrowed uniform. He wasn't smiling anymore. His blue eyes were as cold and hard as glacial ice. "You can mock me all you want," Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. "You can attack me, you can try to absorb me, I don't care. But you don't get to talk to them like that. You don't get to use their pain to make yourself feel powerful." A new kind of power began to radiate from him. It was no longer the warm, gentle aura of the sun. This was the sun's fury. A boiling, golden chakra, tinged with Kurama's own crimson rage, began to leak from him, forming a visible, shimmering cloak of energy around his body. The ground beneath his feet cracked. Kageyama's arrogant smirk faltered, replaced by a look of genuine, avaricious hunger. "Yes, this is it. This is the power I have been seeking." He lunged, not at Naruto, but at Mitsuri, correctly identifying her as the one most emotionally compromised. He never made it. Naruto moved in a blur of gold, appearing between them. He didn't use a jutsu. He just threw a punch. The blow, fueled by his own anger and a measure of Kurama's power, slammed into Kageyama's chest. The sound was like a temple bell being struck by a sledgehammer. Kageyama's eyes bulged in shock as his ribs turned to dust. He was launched backward, a human cannonball, flying through the garden and crashing into the distant wall of the town's outer perimeter with enough force to shatter stone. "Shinobu, Mitsuri, together," Naruto yelled, not looking back. Now, jolted from their shock by his command, the two Hashira moved as one. Shinobu was a flash of purple, her blade aimed at Kageyama's limbs. Dance of the centipede. 100-legged zigzag. She moved in a chaotic, weaving pattern, her blade stabbing and piercing, injecting her strongest poison directly into his joints to slow his regeneration. At the same time, Mitsuri unleashed her fury, the sting of Kageyama's words fueling her attack. Love breathing, sixth form, cat-legged winds of love. Her sword became a vortex of pink, whipping around Kageyama, slicing through his poisoned limbs, her attacks so fast and flexible they were impossible to block. They were a perfect storm of poison and steel, seamlessly coordinated. But Kageyama was far from finished. With a roar of fury, he unleashed a wave of demonic energy that threw both women back. His limbs regenerated, slower than before, but still healing. "Insects," he screamed, His aristocratic composure shattered. He was about to launch a counterattack when a shadow fell over him. Naruto was above him, a Rasengan in his hand, larger and more violent than any he had used before. The three of them had him surrounded. Trapped, Kageyama looked at the spinning sphere of death above him, at the two furious Hashira closing in, and made a calculated decision. He wasn't afraid, but he was not a fool. He had underestimated the synergy of this strange trio. This dance, he snarled, his body beginning to dissolve into a vortex of dark energy, is not yet over. I will have your power, Golden One. And I will enjoy breaking your little friends. With a final, spatial warp, he vanished, leaving only the scent of ozone and blood behind. The three of them stood in the ruined garden, their chests heaving. The adrenaline slowly beginning to fade. They had won. They had driven him off. But he had escaped, and he had shown them that a new, terrifyingly intelligent threat had entered the war. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Firelight Confessions. The adrenaline of battle is a cruel lender. It gives you strength, speed, and the will to survive, but its repayment is exacted with punishing interest. As the last echoes of Kageyama's teleportation faded, a profound exhaustion settled over the three of them, heavier than the night's humidity. The ruined garden was a stark testament to the fight's ferocity. Shattered stone lanterns, uprooted ornamental trees, and the deep, ugly scar where Kageyama had impacted the town wall. They had survived, but the victory felt brittle, temporary. He's gone. Mitsuri breathed, her whip-like sword finally coiling back into its sheath. The moment the immediate threat vanished, the emotional blow of Kageyama's words landed with a delayed, sickening impact. Her vibrant energy seemed to dim, her shoulders slumping. Freak. No normal man could ever handle you. The words echoed in her mind, a venomous whisper that preyed on her oldest and deepest fears. Shinobu was just as shaken, though her mask of composure was more practiced. Her hand rested on the hilt of her blade, a slight tremor in her fingers the only outward sign of the cold fury that Kageyama's taunts had ignited. He had seen her rage, the defining emotion she kept so carefully locked away, and had tried to use it as a weapon against her. It felt like a violation. Naruto looked at them, at the haunted look in Mitsuri's eyes and the brittle tension in Shinobu's posture. He felt a surge of protective anger so fierce it almost made him lash out at the empty air where the demon had been. He had won the physical confrontation, but Kageyama had landed his own precise, psychological blows. Let's get out of here, Naruto said, his voice a low rumble. We're exposed. We need a safe place to rest and tend to your wounds. Shinobu nodded, her mind already shifting back to practicalities. There should be a house with a wisteria crest on the edge of town. A safe house for slayers. It will be abandoned, but secure. Finding the house was easy. A small, unassuming home with the delicate purple flowers carved into its gate, a symbol invisible to the uninitiated but a beacon of safety for the core. Inside, it was clean but empty, smelling of old wood and dried herbs. Naruto moved with a practiced efficiency, starting a fire in the central orori, the crack. Ling flames pushing back the night's chill and casting flickering, dancing shadows on the paper walls. The silence between them was thick with unspoken thoughts. While Naruto prepared the fire, Shinobu Yu retrieved a small medical kit from her uniform, its contents as precise and deadly as her poisons. She gestured for Mitsuri to sit. Your shoulder, Shinobu said, her voice clinical. You were thrown against the wall. Let me see it. Mitsuri winced as Shinobu gently probed the area, her touch surprisingly gentle for a woman who dealt in death. It's just a bruise. A deep one, Shinobu corrected, applying a salve that smelled of wintergreen and something sharper. You were reckless. He was going after Naruto-san. Mitsuri protested, her voice tight. And you were emotionally compromised, Shinobu countered, her movements efficient and sharp as she wrapped a bandage. His words, they affected you. You left an opening. Well, you weren't exactly calm either. Mitsuri shot back, her own frustration bubbling to the surface. I saw your face. You wanted to kill him so badly you could taste it. The air crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with their shared enemy. It was the friction of two very different people who had just had their deepest vulnerabilities prodded by a master manipulator. Naruto listened from his place by the fire, a pot of water balanced over the flames to boil for tea. He recognized this. It was the aftermath of a mission gone wrong, the frayed nerves, the lashing out. He had seen it 100 times with Team 7. He waited, letting them vent, knowing that the poison had to come out before the healing could begin. I am always calm, Shinobu stated, her voice dangerously even. But it was a lie, and all three of them knew it. You're always smiling, Mitsuri corrected, her voice softer now, tinged with sorrow rather than anger. That's not the same thing. That simple, honest statement hung in the air, disarming Shinobu completely. Her hands stilled. For a moment, the serene mask of the insect Hashira slipped, and all that was left was a young woman burdened by a rage too heavy to carry. Naruto chose that moment to intervene. He brought over 3 cups of steaming herbal tea, the fragrant steam rising like a peace offering. He handed one to each of them. She's right, you know, he said to Shinobu, his tone gentle, not accusatory. He sat down, completing their small circle around the fire. You hide behind that smile. And you, he said, turning his gaze to Mitsuri, you're afraid that the best parts of you are the things that will keep you alone. They both stared at him, stunned into silence by his blunt, yet deeply empathetic, perception. He saw them, not as Hashira, not as weapons, but as people. He was smart, Naruto continued, staring into the dancing flames. His real weapon wasn't his sword or that freaky teleporting trick. It was his words. He found the cracks in your armor and tried to shatter you from the inside out. That's an old trick. The best way to beat it is to not have any cracks. He took a sip of tea. Or, if you do have them, you have people to help you hold the pieces together. The simplicity of his wisdom settled over them, soothing their raw nerves. The fire crackled, the warmth leaching the chill from their bones. The shared danger, the intimacy of the small room, and Naruto's quiet strength created a space of profound safety. Here, in this circle of firelight, they didn't have to be Hashira. They could just be. Mitsuri was the first to break the silence. She hugged her knees to her chest, her bright green eyes fixed on Naruto, shimmering with unshed tears. He was right, she whispered, the confession painful. About me. I joined the Demon Slayer Corps to find a husband. Someone stronger than me who could protect me. She laughed, a wet, self-deprecating sound. It's so silly, isn't it? I have this monstrous strength, this weird appetite, this strange hair color, and all I've ever wanted was to be normal. To have someone look at me and not see a freak. Her gaze met Naruto's. When you fought Tsunemi-san, you were so much stronger than him, but you were so gentle. And in the forest, and the dojo, you never once looked at me like I was strange. You looked at my strength and you admired it. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. My heart, it beats so fast when I'm around you, Naruto-san. It's not just admiration. I think I'm falling in love with you. The confession was pure Mitsuri, honest, unrestrained, and straight from the heart. She squeezed her eyes shut after saying it, as if bracing for rejection. Shinobu watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. Naruto didn't laugh or dismiss it. He simply listened, his gaze soft and full of a deep, accepting warmth that seemed to envelop Mitsuri and shield her from her own vulnerability. Then, Shinobu spoke, her own voice quiet, stripped of its usual polite artifice. He was right about me, too. All eyes turned to her. I am filled with a rage that is so constant, it feels like a part of my own blood. It is all I have left of my sister. I smile because if I ever stop, I'm afraid the anger will consume me completely. And there will be nothing left of the person she loved. She looked at Naruto, her purple eyes sharp and analytical, yet holding a new, fragile honesty. Why found your presence to be a dangerous anomaly? An unsolved puzzle, but you are, relentless. Not with your power, but with your sincerity. You don't just look at people, you see them. You saw the poison behind my smile. She took a slow breath. I do not know if it is love. It is not a concept I have had the luxury to consider. But I find your straightforward nature a refreshing antidote to a world of lies. I feel safer when you are near. My mind is quieter. She gave a small, wry, and for the first time, completely genuine smile. And for me, that is a far rarer and more valuable commodity than love. The fire crackled, the flames reflecting in their eyes. Two confessions, as different as the women who offered them, yet born from the same place of raw, unguarded truth. The weight of expectation shifted to Naruto. He held their trust in his hands, a fragile and precious thing. He was quiet for a long time, not out of indecision, but out of a need to give their words the respect they deserved. He thought of Sakura, of Hinata, of the complex tapestry of relationships he had left behind. His heart ached with a familiar loneliness. But as he looked at the two incredible women before him, he felt a new, unfamiliar warmth begin to stitch that wound closed. Back in my world, he began, his voice a low, soothing murmur. I was always chasing after someone. Trying to earn their acknowledgement. Trying to prove I was worthy. I spent so much time looking at other people's backs, I think I forgot to just stand still and let someone stand next to me. He looked at Mitsuri, his eyes crinkling in a soft smile. Your heart is the strongest thing about you, Mitsuri. Stronger than your arms, stronger than your blade. You love so openly, so fiercely, it's like the sun. Only an idiot would call that a weakness. Mitsuri's breath hitched, a fresh wave of tears blurring her vision. But these were not tears of sadness. He then turned to Shinobu. And your mind, Shinobu, it's the sharpest weapon I've ever seen. You carry a heavy burden, a pain that would have crushed most people. But you turned it into strength. You fight a battle on two fronts, one against the demons, and one inside yourself. I don't know anyone else who could do that. He looked at them both, the firelight casting a warm glow on their faces. I don't know what this is. I don't know how I got here, or if I'm ever going home. Everything is uncertain, but what I do know is that I'm drawn to both of you. To your strength, Mitsuri, and to your will, Shinobu. He reached out, not touching, but offering. I don't have all the answers. But I won't lie to you, and I won't ever let anyone make you feel weak for being who you are. Maybe we can just stand next to each other for a while. And figure the rest out together. It wasn't a grand declaration of love. It was something quieter, deeper. A promise of presence, an acceptance of their strange, three-sided dynamic. For Mitsuri, it was the validation she had craved her entire life. For Shinobu, it was a foundation of trust she never thought she'd find. Mitsuri, unable to contain her emotions, shuffled forward and wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. Naruto was startled for a second, then relaxed, returning the embrace. Over his shoulder, his eyes met Shinobu's. She didn't move to join them, but the small, true smile remained on her face. In the quiet warmth of the firelit room, something new and fragile and incredibly powerful had been forged between them. Their return to the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters 2 days later was met not with the praise of a successful mission, but with an atmosphere of cold, simmering dread. The air was thick with it. Young slayers spoke in hushed, worried tones, and even the ever-energetic Sumi, Kyo, and Naho seemed subdued. They found Aoi Kanzaki in the main hall of the Butterfly Mansion, barking orders with more than her usual sharp-edged efficiency. What's going on? Naruto asked, sensing the shift immediately. Did something happen? Aoi turned, her face grim. Something happened, all right. The battle in Akebono. You didn't just kill a few demons. You leveled half a city block. News travels fast, especially when it's politically convenient. She explained that Minister Tanaka, the arrogant official from the capital, had seized upon the incident. He had framed it not as a necessary battle against a monstrous threat, but as an act of reckless vigilantism by an unregulated militia. He painted the Demon Slayer Corps as a danger to public safety, a relic of a bygone era that was incompatible with a modern, orderly Japan. He had swayed the Prime Minister. An official decree was delivered from the capital this morning, Aoi said, her voice low. The Demon Slayer Corps is to say all operations within major townships. Our movements are to be restricted. And, she hesitated, her gaze fixing on Naruto. They have ordered the immediate detainment of the unregistered foreign asset involved in the Akebono incident. They want you. The words landed like stones in the pit of Naruto's stomach. He had become a political liability, a tool for men who cared more for power than or the people they were supposed to be protecting. Before he could even process the implications, the sound of marching feet echoed from the estate's main gate. It was a disciplined, rhythmic sound, completely out of place in the relative quiet of the headquarters. It was the sound of soldiers. Naruto, Shinobu, and Mitsuri rushed to the entrance, arriving just as a contingent of uniformed men, the IR faces grim and their rifles held at the ready, marched into the main courtyard. They were not samurai. They were the new, modern police force of the Meiji government, symbols of centralized authority. They were led by a stern-faced captain who held a scroll bearing an official government seal. Minister Tanaka stood beside him, a smug, triumphant smirk on his face. The Hashira were already assembling, drawn by the commotion. Gyu, Rengoku, Tengen, and even a scowling Tsunemi stood arrayed against the intruders, their hands resting on their swords. By decree of the Prime Minister and the Imperial Government, the captain announced. His voice booming across the courtyard, the Demon Slayer Corps is to stand down. We are here to take custody of the foreign national known as Naruto Uzumaki. Surrender him to us, and you will be in compliance. Tanaka stepped forward. This is for your own good, Hashira. Your organization has become a liability. Hand over the foreigner. It is time for order to be restored. There was a tense, heavy silence. The Demon Slayers and the government soldiers stood facing each other, two eras of Japan clashing in the quiet courtyard. The police captain nodded to two of his men. Take him. The soldiers stepped forward, their hands reaching for Naruto. They never got close. In a movement so fast it was a blur of pink and purple, Mitsuri and Shinobu moved to stand in front of Naruto. Their bodies forming a human shield. With a whisper of steel, their Nichiren blades were drawn, leveled at the throats of the approaching soldiers. Mitsuri's usual cheerful demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of fierce, unwavering resolve. You will not touch him, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Shinobu's smile was fixed in place, but it was a terrifying thing, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. I would advise you, she said, her voice a pleasant, deadly whisper, to take another step. I am quite curious to see if my poison works as effectively on government officials as it does on demons. The soldiers froze, their eyes wide with shock and fear at the sudden, lethal threat. The captain's hand went to the hilt of his own saber. Tanaka's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of outrage and disbelief. This is treason, he shrieked. You are defying a direct order from the government. This is our home, Tsunemi snarled, drawing his own jagged blade with a vicious rasp. And you are uninvited guests. Get out before I decorate the garden with you. One by one, the other Hashira drew their swords. The air thrummed with the collective kill. Intent of the most powerful warriors in the nation, all of it directed at the government agents. It was an act of open defiance, a declaration of war against the very government they had sworn to protect in the shadows. The standoff was absolute, a single spark away from exploding into a bloodbath. Naruto stood behind the two women protecting him, his heart swelling with a fierce, powerful emotion. He was no longer a stranger in a strange land. He had found his people. And they, in turn, had found him. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Hashira's Stand. The air in the courtyard was a razor's edge. On one side, the disciplined, modern face of the Meiji government, represented by rifles and rigid formations. On the other, the ancient, supernatural fury of the Demon Slayer Corps, a living wall of killing intent. At the heart of it all stood Mitsuri and Shinobu, their blades gleaming, a silent, deadly promise aimed at the throats of the soldiers. It was a standoff that could shatter the fragile peace of a nation. A clash between the world as it was and the world it was trying to become. Minister Tanaka's face was a mask of puce outrage. This is an insurrection. You are samurai relics defying the emperor's will. Arrest them all. The captain of the guard hesitated, his hand tight on his saber. He was a soldier, not a fool. He could see the abyss of skill that separated his men from the warriors before him. He saw the inhuman speed with which the two women had moved. He saw the absolute lack of fear in the eyes of the scarred man who looked ready to paint the courtyard with their blood. An order was an order. But this would be a massacre. His men would be the victims. Before he could make a fatal decision, a voice, calm and gentle as a flowing river, washed over the courtyard, cutting through the thick tension. That will be enough. Kagaya Ubuyashiki stood on the veranda, supported by his two white-haired daughters. He was not loud, he did not shout, yet his voice carried an authority that silenced every man present. The Hashira, without turning, visibly relaxed, their killing intent receding not into nothingness, but into a coiled, watchful state. They were hounds, and their master had just spoken. Minister Tanaka, Kagaya said, his blind eyes seeming to look right through the flustered politician. You are a guest in our home. And you have come with weapons drawn. This is a grave breach of etiquette. Quote, etiquette. You are harboring a dangerous entity and defying a government decree. Tanaka sputtered. Am I? Kagaya's smile was serene, but it held a core of unbendable steel. Or are you attempting to seize a valuable asset from an organization that has protected this nation in secret for 1,000 years? Uzumaki-san is not a prisoner. He is a warrior of immense power who has already proven to be an ally in our fight against the demons you claim are mere superstition. He took a slow step forward, his presence filling the space. Let me offer you a political solution, Minister. Since that is the language you understand, you cannot simply take him. It would be an admission that you require our assets, thereby validating our existence, which you are so keen to deny. However, if you leave him with us, you can frame it as a delegation of responsibility. Kagaya's voice was masterful, weaving a web of logic that left Tanaka no room to maneuver. Announce that the government, in its wisdom, has assigned this foreign expert to the Demon Slayer Corps as a special consultant to assist in containing the rural threats we are so adept at handling. It allows you to save face, maintain the appearance of control, and shifts the responsibility for his actions and any collateral damage squarely onto my shoulders. He paused, letting the brilliance of the political checkmate settle. You get to report to your superiors that you have brought the situation under control, and we get to continue our work. Everyone wins. Tanaka stood there, his mouth slightly agape. He had been so thoroughly, so completely outplayed that he could do nothing but stare. Kagaya had taken his aggressive move and used its own momentum to flip it, trapping him in a web of political optics. To refuse the offer would be to admit he was acting out of pure belligerence, not civic duty. The captain of the guard let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod to Kagaya, a soldier's acknowledgement of a superior strategist. Tanaka's face flushed with a deep, impotent rage. This is not over, Ubuyashiki, he hissed, his voice a low threat. The tide of history is turning. You and your band of anachronisms will be swept away by it. He spun on his heel, his sharp western suit looking utterly defeated. Withdraw, he barked at the soldiers. The captain gave a crisp salute, not to Tanaka, but to the veranda where Kagaya stood. He then gave the order, and the soldiers marched out of the courtyard, their relief palpable. The immediate crisis was over. As the gates closed, the Hashira sheathed their weapons. The tension broke, but a new, more complex unease remained. They had stared down the government and won, for now. But they all knew Tanaka was right about one thing. The world was changing, and their place in it was no longer certain. In the aftermath, as the Hashira gathered to discuss the disturbing turn of events, Obanai Iguro's mismatched eyes were fixed on one thing. The easy way Mitsuri stood near Naruto, the lingering protectiveness in her stance. Her open defiance of the government, her immediate, and instinctual move to shield him, it was a declaration louder than any words. And to Obanai, it was like a serpent's bite to the heart. Later that day, he found Naruto alone in a secluded training ground, attempting to practice his control over a Rasengan with his now limited reserves. The swirling blue sphere felt heavier, more demanding, in this world without natural energy. Uzumaki. Naruto turned. Obanai was perched on the branch of a gnarled pine tree, his serpent, Kaburamaru, coiled around his neck, its head swaying rhythmically. Obanai's bandaged face hid his expression, but his voice was a low, dangerous hiss. I don't trust you, Obanai said, dropping lightly to the ground. You appeared from nowhere. You have a power we don't understand. And you have made Kanroji reckless. She was protecting a friend. Naruto replied calmly, letting the Rasengan dissipate. She was protecting you, Obanai corrected, his hand moving to the hilt of his own unique, twisting blade. She has a kind, naive heart. It is easily swayed. I need to know if the object of her affection is worthy of it. I need to know if you are strong, or if you are simply a monster she has mistaken for a hero. Naruto crossed his arms. We've already done this. Ask Tsunemi how it went. Shinazugawa is a typhoon. All power and predictable rage, Obanai hissed, drawing his serpentine sword. I am not a typhoon. I am a serpent, I strike from angles you cannot predict. He settled into a low, coiling stance. This is not a spar to gauge your intent. This is a test. Prove to me that you are capable of protecting her, or I will expose you as the fraud you are. Naruto sighed. It seemed there was no avoiding this. Fine, but if I win, you stop looking at Mitsuri like she's a fragile doll that needs to be kept in a box. You will respect her decisions. Obanai's visible eye narrowed. Let's begin. He didn't charge. He flowed. Serpent breathing. Second form. Venom fangs of the narrow head. He moved in a sinuous, weaving pattern. His blade tracing a path like a striking snake, seeming to bend around Naruto's guard to strike from behind. At the same time, Kaburimaru lunged from his shoulder, a non-venomous but startling feint aimed at Naruto's eyes. Naruto moved with a fluid economy that surprised Obanai. He didn't just dodge, he shifted his weight, rotating on the ball of his foot, letting the coiling blade pass harmlessly by as his other hand came up to gently bat Kaburimaru's head aside. It was a perfect, instinctual defense. Obanai pressed the attack, his movements becoming more erratic, more unpredictable. Fifth form. Slithering serpent. His sword seemed to disconnect from his wrist, flowing and twisting through the air as if it were alive, making it impossible to track the true path of the blade. He was a master of misdirection and unorthodox attacks. But he was facing the king of misdirection. Naruto was a leaf on the wind, always moving, never giving Obanai a solid target. He saw the subtle shifts in Obanai's shoulders, the tensing of his muscles that telegraphed each strike. To Obanai's immense frustration, Naruto wasn't just defending, he was learning, adapting to the strange rhythm of the serpent breathing in real time. Finally, Obanai saw an opening. Naruto sidestepped a slash, leaving his left flank exposed for a fraction of a second. Obanai reversed his grip, his blade whipping back in a blindingly fast arc. The hit never landed. At the moment of the attack, Naruto's body dissolved into a puff of smoke. A substitution. A simple, basic technique from his world, but utterly alien here. Obanai's eyes widened in shock. The attack sliced through empty air. Looking for me. Naruto's voice came from directly behind him. Obanai spun, his blade ready, but it was too late. Naruto stood there, not with a Rasengan or a punch, but with a single kunai, a weapon Obanai hadn't even seen him draw, held delicately against his throat. It hadn't made a sound. Naruto had closed the distance, bypassed his senses, and placed the blade in a checkmate position without Obanai ever registering the threat. The sheer, silent speed and stealth of the move was more terrifying than any display of raw power. Obanai froze, the cold, foreign steel a stark reality against his skin. He had lost. He had been so focused on the monster's overwhelming power that he had completely failed to account for the shinobi's lethal precision. Naruto withdrew the kunai and made it disappear back into a hidden pouch. "You're good," he said, and it was a genuine compliment. "That sword style is a nightmare to predict. But you rely on your opponent not being able to see where the real attack is coming from. You should try it against someone with 3 clones and a smoke bomb sometime." Obanai stood stiffly, his back to Naruto. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, he sheathed his sword with a sharp click. "HMPH, he grunted. He turned his head just enough to glare over his shoulder. "Don't hurt her." With that, he leapt back into the pine tree and was gone, melting into the shadows. It wasn't an apology or an admission of friendship. But it was respect. A grudging, hard-won respect. In the days that followed, an unsettling new pattern of reports began to filter into the Ubuyashiki estate. Kasugai crows arrived bearing news of demonic activity not in villages or cities, but in remote, mountainous regions known for their old, abandoned mines. Specifically, mines that had once been the source of the unique, sun-absorbing ores used to forge Nichiren blades. Shinobu and Naruto puzzled over the reports in her laboratory. "It makes no sense," Shinobu mused, sticking pins into a large map of the region. "These are not high population areas. The demons are ignoring easy prey. There's a report here of a swordsmith's village near the Tamahagane mine being wiped out, but the bodies weren't eaten. They were just discarded." "He's not hunting for food," Naruto said, his eyes tracing the pattern of the pins. "He's gathering resources." "Kageyama. It has to be him." "What resources?" Shinobu countered. The mines are depleted. The swordsmiths are human. He's not looking for ore, Naruto said. A grim realization dawning on him. He's looking for knowledge, and for the raw materials to make his own weapons. He was a demon slayer. He knows how Nichiren blades are made. What if he's trying to create a new kind of blade? One that works for a demon. Shinobu's eyes widened as the horrifying implications clicked into place. A weapon, forged by a demon, for a demon. One that could potentially harness a blood demon art. A blade like that could be used to kill other demons, Naruto finished. He said it himself. He wants to surpass Muzan. Kageyama was no longer just a powerful rogue. He was a faction of one, building an arsenal to wage his own war, with both humanity and Demonkin caught in the middle. He was a revolutionary, a usurper, and that made him infinitely more dangerous than any of Muzan's loyal followers. Their grim theorizing was proven correct in the most dramatic way possible. That evening, as the Hashira gathered for their nightly briefing, a terrified, low-ranked slayer stumbled into the courtyard, his uniform torn, his face pale with shock. He wasn't wounded, but he was trembling uncontrollably. A message, he stammered, pointing a shaking finger back toward the gate. For you. The Hashira rushed outside to find a grotesque sight. A lesser demon was impaled on the estate's main gate by a beautifully forged, but deeply unsettling, black katana. It was still alive, writhing in agony, unable to remove the blade or regenerate around it. Pinned to its chest by a smaller dagger was a scroll of fine parchment. He told me to give you this. The demon rasped, its voice choked with blood and terror, its eyes pleading. He said he would let me live. Gyome Himahima stepped forward and, with a mercifully swift movement, shattered the demon's head. Ending its suffering, the body began to dissolve, leaving the strange black sword and the scroll behind. Rengoku carefully removed the scroll. He unrolled it, his perpetually optimistic expression hardening into a grim line as he read its contents aloud. Greetings, pillars of the Demon Slayer Corps, he read, his voice tight. Let us dispense with the pleasantries. A rival of mine, and a great nuisance to you, has entered my territory. Upper Moon 3, Akaza, is currently indulging his obsession with honorable combat in the mountains to the north. His presence disrupts my work. I propose a temporary cessation of hostilities between us. Let us join forces. Lure him into the abandoned mining complex at Mount Hotaru. Your strength, combined with my unique strategies, will be enough to finally remove one of Muzan's most powerful pieces from the board. Consider it a gift, a demonstration of the benefits of our future cooperation. I await your answer. Kageyama. A stunned silence fell over the assembled Hashira. The sheer audacity of the proposal was breathtaking. An alliance, with the very demon who had nearly killed 3 of them. A trap was the obvious conclusion. A ploy to get them all in one place. It's a trick, Sanemi roared, slamming his fist against a stone pillar. He wants to lure us in and slaughter us all. We should find him and grind him into dust. But what if it is not? Gyome murmured, his prayer beads clicking softly. To eliminate an upper moon, the number of human lives that would be saved is incalculable. Can we afford to ignore such an opportunity? No matter how distasteful the source. The Hashira were divided, caught in an impossible strategic and moral dilemma. To trust a demon was unthinkable. To refuse a NCE to kill an upper moon was a betrayal of their very purpose. They stood in the fading light, the devil's bargain lying open before them, knowing that whatever they chose, the price would be paid in blood. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. An Alliance with a Demon. The debate raged in the main hall of the Ubuyashiki estate, the air thick with conflict and the smoke of incense. It was a storm of pragmatists, clashing with deeply ingrained principles. To even consider this as madness. Sanemi Shinazugawa's voice was a raw, furious bellow. He paced the tatami mats like a caged tiger, his scarred hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. We are the Demon Slayer Corps. We do not make deals with filth. We exterminate them. This is a betrayal of every slayer who has ever died fighting these monsters. Quote, and how many more will die fighting Akaza? Gyome Himahima countered, his voice a deep, sorrowful rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. He sat in Seiza, his massive form exuding a gravitational calm. But his words were sharp. Upper Moon 3 is a catastrophe. He has killed Hashira. To allow him to roam free when we have a chance, however slim, however distasteful, to end him, could be seen as its own form of betrayal. It's a trap, Guillaume, can't you see that? Tengen Uzui argued, leaning back with his arms crossed, his flamboyant demeanor muted by the gravity of the situation. It's completely unflashy. He'll lead us into a pincer, with Akaza on one side and him on the other. We'd be annihilated. Kyojuro Rengoku, his arms crossed and his fiery spirit burning, was uncharacteristically contemplative. His proposal has a certain, twisted logic. Akaza is a threat to Kageyama's ambition. It is in his interest to see him removed. The question is not whether it is a trap, but what kind of trap it is. Shinobu, who had remained silent, finally spoke, her voice cutting through the heated debate with cool precision. Kageyama is an egoist. He believes himself superior to both us and Muzan. This isn't just a trap, it's a performance. He wants to demonstrate his strategic superiority. He believes he can manipulate both the Hashira and an upper moon to achieve his own ends. That level of arrogance can be exploited. All eyes turned to Naruto. He had been listening intently, absorbing the dynamics, the fears, the possibilities. He had faced down master manipulators before, Orochimaru, Kabuto, Black Zetsu. He knew how their minds worked. She's right, Naruto said, his voice steady and confident, drawing the room's focus. He's arrogant, and he's a planner. A guy like that doesn't set a simple ambush. He's got a goal that's more complicated than just killing us. He wants something from Akaza, and he needs us to help him get it. That's our leverage. He looked around at the assembled Hashira, his blue eyes clear and decisive. We accept his offer, but we do it on our terms. We make it clear that this is a temporary, tactical alliance of convenience, not a partnership. My team, me, Shinobu, and Mitsuri, will be the primary liaisons. We've fought him before. We know his tricks. We'll be the ones to meet him and establish the rules of engagement. His confidence was a steadying force in the turbulent room. Kagaya Ubuyashiki, who had been listening from the head of the room with his usual serene stillness, gave a slow, deliberate nod. Naruto-san's counsel is wise. We cannot allow our hatred to blind us to a strategic opportunity. Pride has no place when lives are at stake. He turned his blind gaze towards the assembled pillars. We will proceed with this alliance. But we will do so with our eyes wide open. Trust your instincts. Trust each other. But do not, for a single moment, trust the demon. The meeting point was a desolate, windswept ridge overlooking the valley that held the abandoned mining complex of Mount Hotaru. The moon was a sliver in the sky, casting long, skeletal shadows from the dead trees that dotted the landscape. The air was cold, thin, and humming with a tension so thick it felt like a physical presence. Naruto, Mitsuri, and Shinobu stood waiting. They had come alone, as agreed. The other Hashira were positioned in a wide, hidden perimeter around the mountain, a contingency plan in case the meeting itself was the trap. I still don't like this, Mitsuri whispered, her hand hovering near the hilt of her sword. Her heart was doing its usual frantic tap dance against her ribs, but this time it was a rhythm of pure anxiety. No one does, Shinobu replied, her gaze sweeping the shadows, her smile a placid, unreadable mask. But it is the most logical course of action. A figure emerged from the darkness, walking with an unhurried, aristocratic grace. Kageyama. He was dressed in the same formal hakama, his black katana sheathed at his side. He stopped a respectful distance away, offering a slight, mocking bow. I am pleased you saw the wisdom in my proposal, he said, his voice smooth as polished obsidian. I was beginning to fear your organizational principles would outweigh your desire for victory. We're not here for pleasantries, Kageyama, Naruto said, his tone flat in all business. We're here for the plan. And to set the rules. Rule number 1. You make one move against any of us, the deal is off, and we make it our life's mission to hunt you down. Kageyama's lips curved into a wry smile. But of course, mutual self-interest is the only true foundation for trust, is it not? He unrolled a detailed map of the mining complex, weighting it down with a few stones. The plan is simple, elegant, and relies on Akaza's own predictability. He laid it out with the precision of a master strategist. Akaza, he explained, had a perverse code of honor. He refused to fight or harm women, and He was obsessed with battles against strong opponents. His compass needle technique allowed him to sense fighting spirit, making a direct ambush impossible. Therefore, Kageyama continued, his finger tracing a path on the map. We will not ambush him. We will invite him to a grand stage. The plan was audacious. They would use the strongest fighters, Naruto, Gyomei, Tsunemi, and Rengoku, as bait. They would position themselves in the mine's central cavern, a massive, arena-like space, and openly flare their fighting spirit. Akaza, drawn by the promise of a glorious battle, would be unable to resist. While he is engaged with our main force, Kageyama explained, the rest of you will move through the surrounding tunnels. You will not attack. You will simply be a presence, a net closing in. Akaza will sense you, and his tactical mind will register that he is being encircled. This will distract him, force him to divide his attention. That will be the moment to strike. And what will you be doing while we risk our lives? Shinobu asked, her voice laced with silken venom. I, Kageyama said, a gleam in his crimson eyes, will be the linchpin. My blood demon art allows me to manipulate space in small, localized ways. Once Akaza is engaged and distracted, I will use my ability to subtly warp the battlefield. I will create momentary openings, divert his attacks, and disrupt his footing. I will be your unseen advantage, turning a fair fight into a guaranteed execution. He looked up at them, his expression one of complete, unshakable confidence. He will be so focused on the glorious battle before him that he won't realize the very ground he stands on has become his enemy. We will overwhelm him, and you will take his head. The plan was brilliant. It was also filled with 1,000 opportunities for betrayal. Every element that Kageyama claimed was an advantage could also be turned against them. His spatial manipulation could just as easily disrupt their attacks as Akaza's. The encircling Hashira could be funneled into a trap. It's a huge risk, Mitsuri murmured to Naruto. Every fight is, Naruto replied, his eyes locked on Kageyama, trying to see past the confident facade. But he's right about one thing. Akaza's personality is the key. We use that. He turned back to Kageyama. We have a deal. But the moment the sun begins to rise, this alliance is over. No matter the outcome. An excellent stipulation, Kageyama agreed with a nod. Until the dawn, then, we are allies. The interior of the mining complex was a labyrinth of darkness and decay. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of wet stone and metal dust. The Hashira moved like ghosts through the oppressive silence, taking their positions with practiced efficiency. There was no banter, no wasted motion. The weight of their unholy alliance and the prospect of fighting an upper moon had stripped them down to their core purpose. Naruto stood in the vast central cavern alongside Gyomei, Tsunemi, and Rengoku. The space was immense, the ceiling lost in the darkness above, supported by massive, pillar-like rock formations. It felt like a subterranean cathedral built for a god of war. Let his spirit burn out here, Rengoku declared, his voice echoing in the cavern, a beacon of defiant optimism. Tsunemi just spat on the ground, his hand gripping his sword. Let's just get this over with. Gyomei wept silently, his prayer beads clicking. Namu Amida Butsu, may we have the strength to see this through. Naruto took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and reached inward. Kurama, get ready. This is going to be rough. Kit, this whole world is rough, the fox grumbled in his mind, but Naruto could feel the familiar, comforting surge of chakra as Kurama prepared for battle. As one, the four of them unleashed their fighting spirit. It was not a physical thing, but a palpable wave of energy, a declaration of intent that rolled through the mountain's stony heart. It was a fusion of Rengoku's blazing passion, Tsunemi's serrated rage, Gyomei's mountainous sorrowful strength, and Naruto's own sun-like aura. It was a challenge that no true warrior could ignore. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, they felt it. A presence moving through the mountain towards them, its speed utterly inhuman. It was not an aura of malice or hunger. It was one of pure, joyful power, the energy of a Pradat. Or that has just scented the greatest hunt of its life. A figure landed in the center of the cavern, dropping from a high tunnel with the light, silent grace of a cat. He was a powerfully built demon with pink hair, his muscular body covered in dark blue lines that resembled criminal tattoos. His eyes were a shocking yellow, the sclera blue, with the kanji for upper 3 carved into the iris. Kaza looked at the four warriors arrayed before him, a wide, ecstatic grin spreading across his face. Magnificent, he declared, his voice ringing with genuine delight. Such powerful fighting spirits. All of you are magnificent. I am Akaza. Tell me your names. I want to remember them when I kill you. He then noticed Naruto, and his grin widened even further. And you, I have never sensed a spirit like yours. It is like a star. What is your name? Naruto Uzumaki, Naruto said, settling into a low fighting stance. Naruto, Akaza repeated, savoring the name. Wonderful, you will all become demons. Join me, and we can spend an eternity honing our skills together. We refuse. Rengoku boomed, drawing his blade. We are the demon slayers. We live and die as humans. Akaza's smile became a mask of disappointment. A pity. Then you will die here, as humans. He dropped into a low, martial arts stance. Technique development. Destructive death, compass needle. A beautiful, snowflake-like pattern appeared on the ground beneath his feet, a manifestation of his ability to sense and react to attacks with perfect precision. The battle began. It was not a fight, it was an explosion. Rengoku was a pillar of fire. His flame-breathing clashing with Akaza's destructive martial arts. Sanemi was a whirlwind of wind and rage, his unpredictable slashes trying to find an opening in Akaza's perfect defense. Gyomei was a force of nature, his massive flail and axe swinging with enough force to shatter the very rock formations of the cavern. And Naruto was a golden blur. He fought with a style that was completely alien to Akaza. A chaotic mix of taijutsu, shadow clones, and short, explosive bursts of chakra. Akaza was ecstatic. This was the battle he had always dreamed of. But Kageyama's plan was in motion. As the fight raged, Mitsuri, Shinobu, Gyu, and the others moved into their positions, their presence registering on Akaza's compass needle. He felt the net closing. He felt the shift, from a glorious duel to a tactical encirclement. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. This was the moment. The ground beneath Akaza's feet suddenly lurched, a subtle, unnatural dip of a few inches. It was Kageyama's doing. It was almost imperceptible, but for a master of martial arts like Akaza, whose entire style was based on perfect balance and footing, it was a seismic event. His next blow, a powerful punch aimed at Gyomei, was thrown a fraction of a millimeter off balance. It was the only opening they would get. But the opening was not what they expected. At that critical moment of imbalance, Kageyama did not attack Akaza. He attacked everyone. The space within the cavern warped violently. A wave of dark, spatial energy erupted from the shadows, not aimed at Akaza, but at the Hashira fighting him. Simultaneously, the tunnels where the other Hashira were positioned began to twist and contort, walls shifting, floors dropping away, turning their planned encirclement into a chaotic death trap. Kageyama appeared on a high ledge, his black katana drawn, a triumphant, predatory smile on his face. "Thank you for your assistance, Hashira," he called down, his voice dripping with condescending victory. "And thank you, Akaza Dono, for being such a wonderfully predictable pawn." Akaza, recovering his balance, looked up at Kageyama, his usual joyful battle lust replaced by a look of pure, cold fury. You have no honor. Honor is a luxury of the weak," Kageyama sneered. His goal had never been to simply kill Akaza with the Hashira's help. It was to use the Hashira to weaken and distract Akaza, leaving the upper moon vulnerable for Kageyama himself to finish, and Naruto realized with a sickening certainty, absorb. The trap had been sprung. The alliance was a lie. And now, the battered and exhausted Hashira were caught in a subterranean cavern, trapped between an enraged upper moon and a treacherous, power-hungry usurper who had just played them all for fools. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Price of Power. The cavern descended into pandemonium. Kageyama's betrayal was a cataclysm that shattered the fragile, makeshift reality of the battlefield. The carefully constructed plan collapsed into a chaotic three-way war, a maelstrom of conflicting loyalties and raw, desperate violence. The air, already thick with the dust of battle, now crackled with the energy of two distinct and powerful demonic forces. With the battered Hashira caught directly in the crossfire, Akaza, for his part, was no longer the joyful warrior seeking a worthy challenge. Kageyama's dishonorable tactics had flipped a switch within him, transforming him from a martial artist into a pure instrument of destruction. The snowflake compass beneath his feet glowed with a furious intensity, and Hai's rage was now focused entirely on the treacherous demon on the ledge. To use others to fight your battles, to strike from the shadows, you are a disgrace to the very concept of strength. Akaza roared, his voice echoing with a disgust that was absolute. He ignored the Hashira, his yellow eyes burning with a singular, murderous intent fixed on Kageyama. He launched himself up the cavern wall, running vertically as if gravity were a mere suggestion, his fists blurring as he unleashed a barrage of air pressure punches. Destructive death. Air type. Kageyama met the assault with an arrogant smirk, his spatial warping ability blinking him from place to place on the cavern wall, the explosive punches shattering the rock where he had been a microsecond before. Your adherence to meaningless codes is precisely why you are a tool. Akaza Dono, and I am the artisan. This single-minded focus from Akaza created a sliver of an opportunity for the Hashira. It was a vital, desperately needed moment to regroup. Fall back. Reform at the cavern entrance. Guillaume commanded, his deep voice a rare anchor of stability in the chaos. He swung his massive flail in a wide, defensive arc, shattering a volley of stray energy blasts from the dueling demons. But the retreat was not simple. The cavern, under Kageyama's subtle influence, had become a death trap. The floor buckled and warped, stalactites dropped from the ceiling with lethal precision, and the tunnels leading to their comrades had been twisted into impassable, shifting mazes. During the chaotic scramble, a chunk of the ceiling, dislodged by one of Akaza's misdirected blows, came crashing down. Muichiro Tokido, the mist Hashira, was in its direct path, his attention focused on fending off a ripple of spatial distortion from Kageyama. He was too slow to react. Tokido-kun, Rengoku yelled. In a blaze of motion, the flame Hashira threw himself forward, pushing the younger Slayer out of the way. He took the full, crushing impact of he falling rock on his back and shoulder. A sickening crunch echoed through the cavern, and Rengoku went down, his left arm hanging at a horribly unnatural angle. Rengoku-san, Mitsuri screamed, her heart seizing with terror. The sight of a fellow Hashira falling, the sound of his bones breaking, sent a shockwave of cold dread through them all. The illusion of control was gone. They were no longer hunters, they were prey. Trapped in a collapsing cage with two warring monsters. Shinobu's mind raced, her strategic brain working furiously to find a way out of the tactical nightmare. Mitsuri, seeing Rengoku fall and hearing his pained grunt, felt a surge of desperate, protective fury. And Naruto saw the flicker of fear in their eyes. He saw the tide of battle turning decisively against them. And he felt the familiar, burning rage that always surfaced when his friends were in danger. Kurama, he thought, his mental voice a low growl. He hurt them. He's toying with them. It's time to stop holding back. A deep, rumbling chuckle echoed in his mind, ancient and filled with a terrible glee. Finally, I was getting bored. A volcanic eruption of chakra exploded from Naruto. It was not the warm, golden ore they were used to. This was a churning, boiling maelstrom of crimson and orange energy, thick and malevolent, that coalesced around him. His blue eyes bled into slitted, crimson red. His whisker marks deepened, becoming jagged and feral, his teeth elongated into fangs. A spectral, skeletal outline of a fox's head began to form around his own, its ethereal jaws snapping silently. The sheer, oppressive power that rolled off him was so immense it dwarfed even the demonic auras of Akaza and Kageyama. The temperature in the cavern plummeted as his chakra, raw and untamed, sucked the heat from the air. Akaza and Kageyama both broke off their fight, their heads snapping towards the source of this new, terrifying power. What is that? Kageyama breathed, his arrogant composure finally cracking. His eyes wide with a mixture of awe and avarice. This was the power he had sensed, but its true form was more magnificent and more monstrous than he could have ever imagined. Akaza's compass spun wildly, unable to get a proper reading on Naruto's fighting spirit. It was no longer the clear, bright star it had been. It was now a chaotic, swirling vortex, a black hole of pure, unadulterated rage. Naruto didn't speak, he just moved. He vanished from his spot, reappearing in front of the injured Rengoku in a streak of crimson light. He didn't look at his fallen comrade. His slitted, demonic eyes were locked on Akaza and Kageyama. With one hand, He effortlessly lifted the massive boulder that had pinned the flame Hashira, tossing it aside as if it were a pebble. It crashed against the far wall with the force of a cannonball. Then he turned his attention to the two demons. He raised a hand, and the crimson chakra around him began to churn and condense. It formed into a spectral, demonic claw, vast and semi-transparent, that swiped through the air with terrifying speed. The attack wasn't aimed at either demon specifically, it was aimed at both of them, a gesture of absolute, contemptuous dominance. Akaza, his instincts screaming, abandoned his attack on Kageyama and leapt back, the spectral claws missing him by inches but gouging deep, molten trenches in the cavern floor. Kageyama was not as fast. He tried to warp away, but the sheer density of Naruto's chakra seemed to make the space around him thick and syrupy, slowing his teleportation. The claw slammed into him, not cutting, but blasting him with pure, concussive force. He was sent tumbling through the air, his refined hakama torn and his body smoking, crashing into the rock wall with a sickening thud. The other Hashira could only stare in stunned silence. The power Naruto was unleashing was on a completely different scale from anything they had ever witnessed. It was primal, terrifying, and utterly overwhelming. "Get Rengoku out of here," Naruto's voice growled. It was his own, but distorted, layered with a demonic echo that was Kurama's. "Get everyone back, now." Gyomei, recovering from his shock, nodded sharply. He and Sanemi moved to support the grievously injured Rengoku, who was staring at Naruto with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Uzumaki-kun, what is this power?" he breathed. "It's a friend," Naruto grunted, never taking his eyes off the two demons. Akaza landed on the cavern floor, his body tense, his battle joy gone, replaced by a wary, animalistic respect. "You," he said, his eyes fixed on Naruto's terrifying new form. "You are the one I should have been fighting all along." Kageyama pulled himself from the crater he'd made in the wall, his body already knitting itself back together. A thin trickle of blood running from his lips. His face was a mask of ecstatic madness. "Yes, this is it. This is the power that will make me a god." He lunged, his black katana now coated in a thick, pulsating aura of his blood demon art. Akaza, seeing his prey being targeted, lunged as well, his fist cocked back for a blow that could shatter mountains. They were both attacking Naruto at once. Naruto met their charge head-on. He didn't bother with clones or Rasengans. He fought like a force of nature. He caught Akaza's fist in one spectral, chakra-clawed hand, the impact creating a deafening sonic boom that cracked the ground beneath them. With his other hand, he parried Kageyama's sword, the raw chakra of his arm stopping the demon-forged steel cold. He was holding off an upper moon and a demon of near equal power. Simultaneously. And he was winning. He threw Akaza back, sending him skidding across the cavern floor. He then spun, his legs sweeping out in an arc that Kageyama was forced to warp away from to avoid being cut in two. The sheer pressure he was exuding, the raw, unrestrained violence of his movements, forced both demons onto the defensive. The battle had shifted from a three-way free-for-all to two of the most powerful demons in existence fighting for their lives against a single, incandescently furious opponent. The sun. The thought struck Shinobu as she helped Mitsuri pull a younger slayer back from the collapsing battlefield. The sun was their only true hope. She looked up at one of the mine shafts, a dark maw leading to the surface. It was still deep night. They had hours to go. They couldn't win. Even with Naruto's terrifying power, a battle of attrition against two regenerating demons was a losing proposition. But Kageyama was arrogant. And he had a goal. As Naruto continued his relentless assault, Kageyama realized he couldn't win a direct confrontation. He needed to be smarter. He began to use his spatial warping not to attack, but to evade. Letting Akaza bear the brunt of Naruto's fury. He was waiting, biding his time, looking for an opportunity. He found one. As Naruto slammed Akaza through a massive rock pillar, Kageyama teleported directly behind him. He didn't attack Naruto. He lunged for Akaza, who was momentarily stunned and half buried in rubble. Kageyama's hand, sharpened into a deadly spear, plunged into the upper moon's shoulder. It wasn't a killing blow. He was taking a sample. With a triumphant roar, Kageyama ripped his hand free, a chunk of Akaza's flesh and blood held in his grasp. The final ingredient, he crowed. He immediately brought the bloody prize to his own mouth and consumed it. Akaza screamed, a sound of pure, violated rage, and blasted Kageyama away with a point-blank air-type attack. But it was too late. The damage was done. Kageyama landed on the far side of the cavern, his body convulsing as he began to absorb and integrate Akaza's power. His aura swelled, becoming even more powerful, more unstable. He had what he came for. "Thank you all for this bountiful feast," he roared, his voice distorting. "I will remember you fondly when I am sitting on Muzen's throne." He began to dissolve into a vortex of spatial energy, preparing to flee and digest his prize. But Akaza, enraged beyond reason, was upon him in an instant, his fists flying. He was determined to kill the dishonorable cur, even as the first faint hint of gray began to touch the eastern sky through the distant mine shafts. The sun was coming. Akaza, realizing his time was short, let out one last, frustrated roar and disengaged, retreating into the deepest, darkest tunnels of the mine to escape the dawn. Kageyama, grievously wounded from Akaza's final, furious assault but having achieved his primary objective, seized the opportunity and vanished in a final, desperate warp. The cavern fell silent. The battle was over. Naruto's crimson chakra cloak receded, flickering and dying as he collapsed to one knee, chest heaving. The power was immense, but the strain was equally so. He was back in his own form, exhausted but alive. They had survived, but it was a Pyrrhic victory at best. Rengoku was severely injured, the other Hashira were battered and bruised. And their enemy, Kageyama, had not only escaped, but had grown significantly more powerful. The political fallout from the destruction of an entire mountain would be immense. Later, back at the Butterfly Mansion, the wounded were being tended to in a somber, weary silence. Rengoku was stabilized, his arms set, but he would be out of commission for a long time. The mood was grim. They had gambled, and they had, in many ways, lost. Naruto sat on the veranda of the mansion, staring up at the moon, feeling the deep, aching exhaustion in his very soul. The two women who had confessed their feelings to him in the firelight just nights before came and sat beside him. They didn't speak for a long time, the silence comfortable, supportive. Mitsuri was the first to break it. Her voice soft. "I was so scared," she whispered. "When I saw you like that red energy, it was terrifying. But you were protecting us." She gently placed her hand over his. "Thank you." Shinobu sat on his other side, dabbing a cloth with antiseptic and gently cleaning a cut on his cheek he hadn't even noticed. "Your power is monstrous," she said, her voice devoid of its usual teasing lilt. It was a simple statement of fact. "But your heart is not. I have never been more certain of that than I was tonight." Naruto looked at Mitsuri's hand on his, then at Shinobu's face. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she tended to his wound. In the aftermath of the horrific battle, in the face of their failure and the growing threat of their enemy, this quiet moment, he felt like the only true victory of the day. He had been thrown into this world, lost and alone. But he wasn't alone anymore. He was one point of a triangle, a strange and unconventional shape, but oh, nay, that was proving to be the strongest thing in this entire, demon-infested world. He gently squeezed Mitsuri's hand. He looked at Shinobu and gave her a small, tired smile. Their near-death experience, the shared terror and ultimate survival, had burned away all remaining uncertainty. They were his. He was theirs. It was a truth forged in fire and blood, a quiet commitment made in the shadow of a war that was far from over. In a world of chaos, they were each other's calm. And for now, that was more than enough. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Siege of the Serpent. The news from the capital broke not like a storm, but like a fever. It started with whispers, then progressed to bold headlines in the newspapers that were smuggled into the Demon Slayer headquarters, each telling a more sensational, more damning version of the events at Mount Hotaru. They didn't speak of an alliance with a demon or a battle against an upper moon. They spoke of a territorial dispute between rival clans of powered vigilantes that resulted in the catastrophic destruction of a national resource. Minister Tanaka had not just seized the narrative, he had rewritten it completely, painting the core as a destabilizing force. A cancer on the modernizing body of Japan. The government's response was swift and decisive. The decree that followed was not a restriction, it was a death sentence for the organization. The Demon Slayer Corps was officially branded a rogue element, its members declared enemies of the state. Their assets were to be seized, their members arrested, and their ancient order dismantled by force. The first sign of the new reality was the silence. The Kasugai crows, their vital messengers, stopped arriving. The network of safe houses and wisteria-crested supporters went dark. They are owners too terrified to associate with a proscribed organization. The Demon Slayer Corps, for the first time in its 1,000-year history, was completely and utterly isolated, an island in a nation that had suddenly turned hostile. Then came the soldiers. This was no small contingent led by a reluctant captain. This was a full regiment of the new Imperial Army, dispatched from the capital with grim purpose. They marched in perfect, disciplined columns, their dark wool uniforms and bayoneted rifles a stark symbol of the new era. They did not attempt to enter the Ubuyashiki estate. Instead, they surrounded it, their methodical efficiency more chilling than any direct assault. They erected barricades on the roads, set up sentry posts in the surrounding forest, and established a perimeter so tight that not even a field mouse could get through unnoticed. A siege horn, a brassy, mournful sound so alien to the tranquil gardens, sounded once at dawn and once at dusk, a constant reminder of their imprisonment. Inside the walls, the atmosphere was suffocating. The sprawling estate, once a sanctuary, had become a luxurious prison. The Hashira, beings of incredible power and freedom, were reduced to pacing the verandas like caged animals. The tension was a thick, foul poison, seeping into every interaction. Tsunemi and Obanai were volcanoes of pent-up aggression, their training sessions becoming barely controlled brawls. Rengoku, his arm still in a sling, tried to maintain his buoyant optimism, but even his spirit seemed to flicker in the face of their hopeless situation. Guillaume's prayers became longer, his tears more frequent. Naruto, Mitsuri, and Shinobu found their solace in each other's presence. They trained together, ate together, and sat in long, comfortable silences, a small island of calm in the churning sea of anxiety. The siege had solidified their bond, the external pressure forcing them to rely on each other completely. "We could fight our way out," Mitsuri said one afternoon, watching the distant glint of a soldier's spyglass from a rooftop. "All of us together, they couldn't stop us." "And go where?" Shinobu countered, her voice weary. She was seated beside her, sharpening the tip of her blade. The rhythmic scrape of stone on steel, a nerve-wracking sound. "Become fugitives. Hunt demons while also being hunted by our own people. We would be trading one cage for a much larger one. And we would be proving Tanaka right. We would become the violent relics he claims we are." Naruto leaned back against the roof tiles, his arms crossed behind his head, staring up at the sky. "This isn't the endgame," he said, his voice certain. "Tanaka is just a politician grabbing for power. The real player isn't even on this board. We're all staring at the cage door, we should be looking for the one who locked it." His words, as usual, cut to the heart of the matter. This wasn't about them and the government. This was about Kageyama. Their grim understanding was soon confirmed. The first reports were fragmented, smuggled in by a lone, brave slayer who had slipped through the cordon in the dead of night, his body bruised and his spirit broken. The news he UGHT was of a new and terrifying demonic offensive. Kageyama, empowered and apparently destabilized by his consumption of Akaza's blood, had not unleashed a wave of mindless slaughter. His attacks were strategic, precise, and aimed directly at the heart of the new Meiji government. A railway bridge connecting Tokyo to the western provinces was destroyed, its steel trestles twisted into unrecognizable shapes by some inhuman force. A key telegraph station was annihilated, its operators found dead, their bodies untouched but their minds seemingly shattered by some unknown horror. An army outpost, guarding a major ammunition depot, was wiped out overnight, its soldiers killed by a single, impossibly fast swordsman who moved like a ghost. The attacks created a wave of panic and chaos far greater than any random civilian massacre could have. It crippled infrastructure, disrupted communication, and displayed the shocking impotence of the new, modern army. Kageyama was demonstrating, on a national stage, that the government could not protect its people. He was creating a power vacuum, one that he intended to fill. He was waging a war of terror and propaganda, and he was winning. In the main hall, Kagaya Ubuyashiki sat before a map of Japan, his Hashira gathered around him. The reports of Kageyama's attacks were marked with black stones. They formed a clear, strategic pattern. He is dismantling the nation's nervous system. Kagaya said, his voice a soft, sorrowful whisper. He is isolating the capital, sowing fear and confusion. And he is using Minister Tanaka's own ambition as his primary weapon. The army is focused on us, a non-threat, while the true danger dismantles the state from the outside in. We have to do something. Sanemi snarled, slamming his fist on the floor. We can't just sit here and wait to be starved out while that bastard runs wild. And what do you propose? Obanai hissed from his corner. We fight our way through a regiment of our own countrymen. We would be branded traitors. Even if we succeeded, our reputation would be destroyed. We would have no support, no resources. We would be finished. They were trapped in a perfect strategic checkmate. To stay was to slowly wither and die. To fight their way out was to commit political suicide and prove their enemies right. Kageyama had engineered a situation where their greatest strength, their absolute dedication to protecting Japan, was the very thing holding them captive. That evening, Kagaya summoned Naruto, Shinobu, and Mitsuri to his private chambers. The master of the core looked more fragile than ever, the purple curse on his face seeming darker in the candlelight. Yet, his voice held a clarity that was absolute. The board is set in a way we cannot win, he said, pouring them all tea with a steady hand. To win, we must therefore shatter the board. He looked at them, his blind eyes seeming to pierce their very souls. Kageyama's goal is to usurp Muzan. He sees him as a decadent, stagnant ruler. A usurper, by his very nature, creates instability. And there is no one in this world who despises instability, and usurpers, more than Muzan Kibutsuji himself. Shinobu's eyes widened, the horrifying, brilliant, and utterly insane implication of his words dawning on her. Oyakata-sama, you cannot be suggesting. Muzan is the demon king, Kagaya continued, his voice even. He rules through absolute fear and control. Kageyama is a direct threat to that control. He is a rival, a second sun in a sky that can only accommodate one. Right now, Muzan likely sees Kageyama's war against the government as a useful chaos. But he does not yet understand the true scope of Kageyama's ambition. He slid a small, tightly rolled scroll across the table. It was sealed not with the Ubuyashiki crest, but with a simple, unmarked black wax seal. This is a message, Kagaya said. It contains details of Kageyama's origins as a demon slayer, his unique blood demon art, and his ultimate goal of consuming Muzan to achieve a new form of demonic godhood. He paused, the weight of his next words filling the room. I need you to deliver it. Not to an ally, but to an upper moon. The three of them stared at the scroll as if it were a live scorpion. To intentionally seek out an audience with one of their most powerful enemies, it was unthinkable. It was suicide. There is a demon Muzan often uses as a messenger and an observer. Kagaya explained. Nakame, the Biwa demon. Her ability to manipulate space makes her the ideal courier. She can be found where art and tragedy intersect, theaters, geisha districts. She observes humanity. Find her. Give her this message. Do not fight her. Simply deliver it. Plant a seed of discord in the heart of our enemy's hierarchy. Turn our two greatest threats against each other. It was a desperate, mad gamble, a throw of the dice that could end in their immediate and brutal deaths. But as Naruto looked at the calm, resolute face of their leader, he understood the genius of it. When your enemies have you surrounded, the only way out is to make them fight each other. The siege broke on the 7th day. The patience of Minister Tanaka had finally worn thin. His political rivals were using the chaos caused by Kageyama's attacks to criticize his leadership. He needed a decisive, public victory, and crushing the rebellious, Demon Slayer Corps was the only one available to him. At dawn, the mournful siege horn blew a different pattern, 3 short, aggressive blasts. The order to attack. The Hashira stood arrayed before the main gate of the estate, their blades drawn, their faces grim. They were not just warriors, they were a living wall, the last defense of their home. Naruto, Mitsuri, and Shinobu stood at the forefront, the scroll from Kagaya tucked securely in Naruto's uniform. Their mission was not to fight here, but to break through the chaos and find the Biwa demon. The soldiers advanced, a slow, methodical tide of dark uniforms and gleaming bayonets. The rhythmic tramp of their boots was a drumbeat counting down to bloodshed. The captain in the lead raised his saber, his face a mask of grim duty. Advance. He brought his saber down. And at that exact moment, the world erupted. From the forests on either side of the advancing soldiers, all hell broke loose. The trees themselves seemed to come alive as dozens, perhaps hundreds, of demons burst from the shadows. They were not the mindless brutes the slayers were used to. They moved with a chilling coordination, a pack of wolves descending on a herd of sheep. Kageyama had said the government's own attack as the perfect cover for his own. The disciplined lines of soldiers dissolved into a screaming, chaotic morass. Rifles fired, but the demons were too fast, too numerous. They tore through the ranks. A whirlwind of claws and fangs. The soldiers' confident advance became a terrified, desperate struggle for survival. The courtyard before the Demon Slayer headquarters as instantly transformed into a three-way battlefield, a meat grinder of soldiers, demons, and the trapped Hashira. From a high branch overlooking the carnage, Kageyama watched, his handsome face illuminated by the fires of the battle. A conductor savoring his own brutal symphony. Naruto, Mitsuri, and Shinobu stood at the gate, the sounds of battle a deafening roar. In front of them, the men they were honor-bound to protect were being slaughtered. The demons they were honor-bound to kill were running rampant. And their only path to completing their insane, desperate mission lay directly through the heart of the maelstrom. Well, Naruto said, a grim, determined smile touching his lips as he drew a kunai. Looks like the front door is open. Shinobu drew her blade, its slender form a deadly promise. It seems our path has become rather cluttered. Mitsuri's whip-like sword unfurled, flowing around her like a living thing, her eyes filled with a fierce, protective fire. Then let's clear it. They looked at each other. A silent agreement passing between them. Their loyalty was not to the government that had betrayed them or to a battle they hadn't chosen. Their loyalty was to their master, to their mission, and to each other. With a shared battle cry, the three of them plunged headfirst into the raging chaos. Chapter 9 End.